how to be honest when you have moments of weakness, how to be honest when you're feeling afraid, how to be honest when you're feeling like a failure as a leader.
Leadership is the ability to get a lot of people moving in the same direction for their own selfish reasons. People really, really, really have to contextualize this. Germany was in hyperinflation. It was a really bad time to be a German. And it now becomes just historically predictable that the quote unquote strong man is going to rise in that period.
Strength, courage, independence, leadership, as you've said, and assertiveness. What is your view on that set of masculine traits?
I am not as compelled as many other people are that the government can't seize your Bitcoin. Should they so decide, they will beat you to death for your money, or maybe they'll start with your kids. Boys and girls, if you have not read the Gulag Archipelago, read The Red Famine if you really want to get excited. Once I realized, I have to invest my money because this is a corrupt system where my money is being stolen from me. Then I was like, this is bullshit. I shouldn't have to do this.
Well, the first time you go into it, how could you not be mad, right? Like, it's the biggest scam in the history of the human race, as far as I can tell.
Hey everybody, welcome to the What is Money Show. I am thrilled to have you here joining me on my mission to help shine light on the corruption of money. Now, if this is your first time listening to the What is Money Show, I strongly recommend that you go back to episodes 1 through 9 first, which lays a lot of the groundwork for many of the concepts that we explore on the show. These first 9 episodes are my series with Michael Saylor, and thousands of people have told me that this is the best podcast series they've ever heard, hands down, and that it was instrumental to their understanding of money and Bitcoin. So if you're looking to start a deep dive into the nature of money, I don't think there's any place better that you can start other than episode 1 of this show. Now, a little bit about this show and how it makes money. The What is Money Show is 100% sponsor based. So all of our revenues are derived from direct sponsorships. And I strive to be very selective about the sponsors that I work with, specifically only using sponsors that I use personally, and also choosing sponsors that have values which are well aligned to the values expressed on this show, such as freedom, education, self-sovereignty, etc. So what I'm going to do now is a few ad reads right at the top of the show, and then I'll do a few more ad reads in the middle. And I hope you'll take the time to listen to them, as again, these are hand-selected sponsors, and I think you'll like what they have to offer.
Have you ever wanted to start a business in the Bitcoin space? If so, then the Wolf Startup Accelerator could be for you. Wolf is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to businesses developing in the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times each year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. Go to wolfnyc.com to learn more or apply today. Again, that's Wolf, WOLFNYC.com. So, Tom.
Yes.
Great to have you here in Miami.
It's great to be here.
We're doing something a little bit experimental here because I'm going to go through a new outline sequence with you that I shared with you earlier. And the idea is to try and, I guess I'm trying to support this movement towards like sound masculinity. I think it's something that's sorely needed in the world. Like, we have a movement towards masculinity, but a lot of it is sort of this loud, watches, cars, and hoes kind of thing. And like, I think that's ridiculous. Trying to get men pointed at, traditional masculinity. And so I wanted to ask you today about some of that. Obviously, you are a guy that has come from the proverbial bottom to the top. And so I wanted to dig into some of your personal journey, but also some of your life philosophy and views on this. And so the framing I'm using for this is the word alpha. And so this has basically 3 senses in what I'm going to use today. And one is obviously the alpha male, right? The very obvious one, the dominant individual or animal in a group. Under this umbrella, we're going to talk about things like charisma, character, competence, physical fitness, critical thinking, emotional equanimity, humor, leadership, etc. There's also the concept of market alpha, which is how much an investment outperforms the market rate. So we'll talk about sort of money and investment risk, returns, things like that under that sense of the word alpha. And then lastly is this idea of the alpha and omega, which is, the status of a thing being first, primary, or principal. And so under this sense of the word alpha, I want to get into ancient wisdom, virtue, heuristics, philosophy, meditation, breath work, religion, God, all these, kind of headier philosophical topics. So with that, we'll start with alpha male. I don't know. I would say, based on what I've heard from some of your podcasts, you would probably not have described yourself as an alpha male earlier on in life, but you've certainly cultivated yourself and trained yourself and crafted yourself to become quite an alpha male over time. And as my understanding is, the primary role of masculine energy is to protect and provide. So how could we just start with that? How have you taken yourself as a work of art, if you will, to go from wherever you began in life to where you are today? What have been some of your strategies for developing your masculinity?
Ooh, okay. That is a hyper layered question that, let's see if we can peel back the layers. So first of all, I have an obsession with utility. And as you were describing, the idea of protect and provide, while I do think those are the underlying driver of what somebody who is channeling masculine energy is trying to do, the way in which you do it is probably far more interesting of a place for people to focus on. And I think what people really need to understand in the journey of me going from somewhat effeminate to really becoming traditionally masculine, aggressive, being able to dominate a situation in a way that we should probably define. Because I'm not a guy that walks into a room with bluster, and I'm in fact the exact opposite. But my goal was trying to assess the world by what behaviors and characteristics are actually useful. Now, if you want to know what's useful, you have to understand what your aim is. And this is where so many people go wrong. Certainly, just to put things in an entrepreneurial context, this is the mistake. The mistake that entrepreneurs make is they lack clarity. They don't know what they're trying to do. They fail to understand the essence of the thing, so they don't understand business itself. The whole idea of you starting a podcast called What is Money, to me, that's somebody who's trying to understand the essence of the thing. Now, the reason that matters, and this is what I really think masculine traits are about, it's about leadership. It just so happens that people have given the moniker alpha to those that can lead. But now it gets very confusing as to what traits actually help a leader and what hurts a leader. And so you can come in with bluster, with arrogance, being overly aggressive, and you can dominate people to the point where they will follow you out of fear or a mixture of fear, admiration, some amount of longing. They wish they could do what you can do. But it can become, you will get caught off guard if you don't understand the ways in which you're influencing the individual people. And this is oftentimes where leadership will break down. You have a general understanding of the umbrella of how you're getting people to follow you. I've got a vision. I'm pushing it forward. I'm a big personality. Some people love me, some fear me, some hate me, but they all think I'm better. That'll be sort of the more narcissistic take on a leader who's really seeing it from their perspective. Whereas what I would posit for people is leadership is the ability to get a lot of people moving in the same direction for their own selfish reasons. Now, when you're doing that and people are following you because their selfish desires are aligned with you, now you're going to be truly effective because those people aren't looking to usurp you. They realize that you're their surest path to success as they define it.
Right.
And so that was really my journey, coming up and realizing, okay, wait a second. This isn't about being a badass. This isn't about being cool. This is about understanding the nature of leadership, which is I have to first understand the people that I'm leading. I need to be solving a problem for them, their problem, not my problem, their problem.
Right.
And if I can intoxicate them with certainty in the belief that I will take them where they want to go. Now, since I said the very first mistake people make is they lack clarity. So I have to lead people in their best interest to a place they don't even know they want to go to. So I've got to identify that, what's going to be a good outcome for them. I have to then articulate that to them. Hey, you should want this thing. And then I need to be able to lead them there. And when they get there, it needs to actually have been the thing that was good for them all along. So when they get there, I've now reinforced my leadership because now they're like, whoa, he told me a thing. You should want to go here for this reason. And at first I wasn't so sure. But then, because he intoxicated me with certainty, I followed him there. And when I got there, it really was better. And now you can take them to the next place and the next place and the next place. Because if at each locale, their life really is better, then they're going to be like, whoa, this person really is doing something that's good for me. Now, anybody listening to that is going to recognize that is not the universal way that people lead. And so when you understand that really what leaders do now is they intoxicate people with certainty, and it's somewhat irrelevant as to whether when the person gets there, their life is better or not. And the reason that will work over and over and over is people abhor confusion. They don't want to stand still. And there's a whole host of psychological reasons as to why that's true. But he who intoxicates people with the most certainty, that identifies the problem the person already knows they have, and then says, guaranteed, if you follow me here, that your life is going to be better, people will follow them just about anywhere. And then if they can deliver something when they get there, so I mean, Nazi Germany becomes just the best example of this ever. People really, really, really have to contextualize this. Germany was in hyperinflation. It was a really bad time to be a German. Culturally, they were completely humiliated by World War I. They had debts that they could never hope to pay off. Just everything was in absolute turmoil. And it now becomes just historically predictable that the quote unquote strong man is going to rise in that period.
Times of chaos. Yeah.
And the reason is people want to be led to somewhere better, and they need someone that can come in this highly tumultuous time where people are fighting, and they say, I am the single person with the single answer, and you need only follow me. Now, if you give them that, and there are early signs that it's working, now all of a sudden that they will quite literally follow you anywhere.
Right.
And so that is one of those, to just recognize the human condition of all of that, I think is really, really important. So anyway, I'm looking at that milieu, and I'm expressing my leadership in two ways: my marriage. And for people that don't know, I got married quite young. So I got married at 26. It ended up being the greatest thing of my life. I'm very glad that I found my wife early. But so expressing leadership there and expressing leadership in business and realizing the similarities and the differences. But what took me on the journey from being weak to being strong was holding myself relentlessly accountable to results. And by holding myself relentlessly accountable to results, and I knew what the results were that I wanted. And in the beginning, they were somewhat deranged in that I would have simply said, I want to get rich. Very quickly, I realized, oh, wait, that actually doesn't make me feel the way that I want to feel, which made me realize, oh, this is a game of what I would now say, it's a game of earning my own respect.
Yeah.
And so once you realize, okay, life is a game of earning my own respect because of how that will make me feel about myself, both in wins and losses. So wait, in a loss, I can still feel good about myself? Yes, if you acted in accordance with your value system, you'll still feel good, and you'll see it as an opportunity to learn and grow. But okay, I get it. I'm now playing a neurochemical game. So I need to understand the thing I'm trying to control has an essence. If I understand that essence, then I won't get blindsided. I won't be a slave to my emotions, for instance. And so I came to realize that my psychological response to a given life circumstance was predicated on my beliefs and my values. And so as I started asking, okay, what are the beliefs and values that I believe one ought to hold? And I use that word very intentionally. What are the beliefs and values one ought to hold in order to live a quote unquote good life, so that if I adhere to it, even if it all fails to reach my ultimate aims, that I would say, this was a good life, and I can and should respect myself even in failure. And so being strong enough to overcome obstacles becomes incredibly important. That I have invited my wife to latch her train onto me. And we were, because this is back in, like 2000, she's going to latch her train to me in a really traditional way. We don't end up being a super traditional marriage, but we started that way. And so I'm like, okay, if I fail, now she fails as well. And so I feel a tremendous responsibility, and I shouldn't want to shy away from that. I ought, in fact, a better way to say it, I ought to want that responsibility. But that means that I really do have to get better, because if I don't get better and I indulge in all the lazy impulses that I have, I don't just ruin my life now, I ruin her life. And so all of that starts to formulate this thing I now call my frame of reference around the things that I choose to believe, because make no bones about it, beliefs are choices. Hopefully you are making choices around what you believe has the most proximate locale to truth. But since identifying the laws of physics, which is the only capital T truth, is excruciatingly difficult, it's mostly going to be an approximation. But you're going to choose your beliefs that you think move you towards your goals. And then your value system is a little bit different, but it's basically what is the North Star of human existence? Most people don't have one. For me, it's human flourishing. And then, okay, if I'm really aimed at human flourishing from a values perspective, how does that begin to break down into daily actions and things I should hold myself accountable to? So anyway, it's a very long journey that I go on that takes more than a decade. And has me just constantly evaluating. I don't feel the way I want to feel right now. Why not? Am I out of alignment with my values, or do I have a value that makes no sense?
You use this term, intoxicating with certainty, as part of the leadership role. So you are creating a vision for your team, for your wife, for your family, right? Everyone that orients themselves behind what you also said creating clarity, right? So I assume that means choosing the target, right? This is the direction we're going. Get behind me. Let's go. How do you balance that out with the inherent fallibility of being human? Because I'm sure there have been plenty of times that you've set the aim, maybe even achieved the aim, and it wasn't what you thought it would be. Or maybe you set the aim and missed the aim and had to recalibrate and get those people reorganized and oriented again. How do you then, because you have to intoxicate people with certainty, but you're existing in a highly uncertain environment where you're inevitably going to miss, probably more often than not. How do you then balance this intoxication with certainty that comes with natural masculine alpha leadership with this humility in an uncertain world?
Yeah, this is the question. So there's a formula. And what you're going to do, one, be careful what you build your brand, for lack of a better word. Even as a leader, you're going to have a brand with your team. And so be careful what you build your brand around. So whenever I bring somebody onto the team, I say, I'm going to be very honest with you. I'm not great at anything that the company does. My job is to create the soil in which incredibly talented people can thrive. I'm always going to know where we're going, and I'm always going to know the path that we're going to get there. And I'm going to tell you, dear person considering coming on this team, a little secret. And that secret is that I'm not smart enough to get us there alone. And if I were smart enough to get us there alone, then maybe I could be Steve Jobs and I could be a dick and burn people out. But we get such incredible results that it doesn't matter. And, I'm a once in a generation kind of person. Unfortunately, that is not my skill set, but I am extremely good at learning from mistakes. And so you are plugging into an organization that runs something called the physics of progress. And I'll walk them through what the physics of progress are. And if you want to talk about it later, we can. But suffice it to say that I show them how we're going to leverage always taking action, knowing that we're going to make mistakes, learning from those mistakes and moving forward. And the thing that you can count on me to do is I won't break, I won't slow down. I will always be able to get you past a roadblock. And most importantly, because I know I'm not smart enough to get there by myself, you actually will matter in this company. And I need you to bring the full weight of your talent and intelligence. Now, if you ever look at me and I say, I don't know what we're doing, then you can turn and run screaming in the other direction. But that'll never happen. That's my superpower. I know where we're going and I know how to get there. Now, the deep, dark secret of it all, and I will tell them this, is that the only thing I know about my plan is that it's flawed in some way. And so I need people that will point out when they think I'm doing something stupid. So I know that every other company you've worked for, you would be fired for in a meeting saying to the CEO, I think this is really dumb. I think what you're proposing is asinine. We absolutely should not do it. I said, not only will you not get fired at Impact Theory for that, I will thank you publicly for doing it. Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to agree with you and your ideas better be fucking good because I'm going to challenge you, because I need to know that your ideas actually are better than mine and that they have a higher degree of likelihood to move us towards the goal. But the reason that your previous bosses had a hard time with that is their ego is tied up in being right, better, faster, stronger. They believe they've gotten to that position because they're smarter than you. That's their brand. And so anybody hitting them with, that's not a good idea, now they have to defend their entire brand. They have to shut you down. You become a danger. You challenge their authority. You have to get out. I'm a raging egomaniac. This really is true, by the way. However, I've been extremely thoughtful about what I build my self-esteem around. And so I build my self-esteem around identifying the right answer. And so rather than trying to be right, I just want the right answer. Now that means that my organization is entirely pointed at what actually works. And this is why I tell people I am obsessed with utility. Utility. If something works, I'm going to do it. If it doesn't work, I'm not going to do it.
Right.
And so I'm just constantly trying to find out, does this actually work? We have a KPI that we're aimed at. By doing this thing, did we actually move closer to our goals? Yes or no? So in the physics of progress, when I draw it, it's a circle with a nodule on it. And the nodule is the KPI you expected to achieve by running any given experiment. And it's just so that people can really follow along, I will give the world's fastest primer on the physics of progress. It is basically the scientific method recontextualized for business. So you're going to come up with your best guess, your hypothesis. So what's my hypothesis on how to make meaningful progress towards my goal? And to do that, I have to know the obstacle. So I have a goal. There's an obstacle that stands between where I'm at now and the goal I want to achieve. What would I need to do in order to overcome that obstacle? Okay, we're going to turn that into a KPI. If I launch this product, I expect to have $1 million of sales in Q1. Okay, cool. Line it up, sell it. Did you get $1 million in Q1? No, I didn't. Instead, we made $10,000. Okay, you weren't off by a little, you were off by orders of magnitude.
Yeah.
So now what happens is most people at that moment, they either didn't put the KPI ahead of time. I expect $1 million, let's say, in profitable revenue by March 31st. Cool. Now we know exactly what we're expecting to happen. They either don't set that metric or they do set that metric and then they lie when they get the bad results. Now, the reason they do that is because they think their job is contingent on them hitting that metric, or their ego is contingent on them hitting that metric. So better to not have a metric so we don't know whether it succeeded or failed. And if we do get it, blame COVID, blame skin color, blame whatever. All of that's illogical because you should be oriented towards your goal and not your ego. And so in that moment, I actually will go, oh, cool, I've done something wrong. I did not get the outcome that I wanted. But when I say I did something wrong, I feel better about myself, not worse. Because my ego is predicated on staring nakedly at my inadequacies because I'm just looking for the right answer.
That's learning, right?
And so, exactly. Yeah. So when you put somebody in that organization at first, they're super hesitant to tell you when they think you're doing something wrong because they're still convinced they're going to get fired because they've had so many years of that. And then slowly over time, they realize, whoa, people are actually celebrated here for pointing out a bad idea. And then that's how the company ends up making progress. And so, look, I intoxicate people with certainty. I know that some part of my plan is flawed,
Right.
but I don't talk about that endlessly. I just say we're going to do this and it's going to work. Go, go, go. And then I'll notice, this part's broken. I will fix it. And then I'll be like, hey, everybody, that didn't work. Why? I can't believe we ever thought it would. This new thing is the thing. And ironically, as long as you're certain and they see that you're right more than you're wrong, they see that you're making progress, they'll be like, word, like this guy actually will change his mind. Yeah. And if you'll change your mind, especially if you can do it in real time, when somebody challenges you, they give you a better idea. Not only do you not steal their idea, you celebrate them to the ends of the earth. You thank them for bringing that good idea. There are times, Robert, where I will lie. I will come up with an idea and I'll be like, Robert, that idea was so brilliant. I'm so glad you came up with it. And even though they know they didn't, they love hearing it be pointed at them. So if you can find any way to hand off credit to somebody else, that idea is way more likely to get across the finish line.
Wow.
So yeah, I'll stop there. It is a much bigger thing. We could spend the 5 hours just on that.
That is so interesting. So, and I mean, in a way, there's a paradox, because you're saying that you need to intoxicate them with certainty, but the one certain thing about your plan is that there's something that's uncertain about it, right? You're going to be wrong about something. But that is just sort of built into the processual nature of it, that it's not one fixed plan that doesn't change, right? It's an adaptive plan over time. So as you get punched in the face, as Mike Tyson would say, you're learning to bob and weave and change your strategy as you go. This sounds a lot like protecting and providing to me, actually, is that you're getting people want, first of all, they want the security of kind of a job, right? They want to be under someone that is going a direction, so that alleviates the anxiety of, choosing which way to go, right? This is, I guess, part of leadership. You're protecting them from that uncertainty to some extent. Maybe that is the intoxication with certainty, as you said. And then you're also providing by achieving these goals that are unlocking new resources to pay people and grow the team and all of that. So is this... this is like an inherently masculine energy thing, but I can hear a lot of maybe wokest and or women in the world be like, well, women can do it too. So like, I guess that is the question. Is this an inherently masculine energy thing? Or is this something that, obviously women have masculine energy as well. Is this something that anyone can do, or is this something that's more geared towards men? Like, how do you think about that?
Well, I think anybody can do it for sure, because these are just patterns.
Right.
It's a ability to understand, if I do this, I will get this outcome. And so anybody with sufficient intellect is going to be able to do that, male or female.
Yeah.
Now, when you talk about what are the things that intrigue you most in life, I think they're going to steer your life. And so if, for instance, I love aggression, just love it. And so going in and being aggressive, tackling a roadblock, sending somebody, I was having a conversation over Slack. We have this new woman on our team, really bright. And she was like, hey, Tom, that idea you had was really good, but here's why I don't think it's going to work. It's going to cause like years of delay. Now, for me, I just immediately go, because we're talking about a video game. I'll just make this really specific so people understand how to think through this. I wanted to get a rating for our game. So this is for everyone, or this is for teens, whatever.
Yeah.
But the way we build our game is in phases. And the person that I was pitching this idea to was like, it's a brilliant idea. However, I've been at other companies where we do this, and getting that rating can take a very long time, because you have to show what your game is going to be in totality. It's going to take us years to finish building our game because of all the phases. And so even though I think it will help us from a marketing perspective, we shouldn't do it now, because we'll end up in this really long process. Now, for me, I see that and go, okay, I love a good roadblock. What's the solution? The solution here is very self-evident. Instead of launching it in phases, just say this is part 1, this is part 2, this is part 3. Make them discrete games. Will not matter at all to the player base.
Right.
And so if that's all I have to do to get my rating now, then let's do it. Now, if we look at it and go from a marketing perspective, it's pointless, then I won't do that, because there's nothing to gain from doing it. But if I see that there's utility, going back to my obsession with utility, in breaking this up. And so her response when I laid that forward was, oh, but I thought that we were just going to do this as one game and that's what you'd been saying this whole time. And I was like, that is what I was saying, but you just gave me a roadblock and I gave you a solution. And so I'm like, once you accept that you have an obligation as the leader protector to, when you encounter a roadblock, it is a mortal sin to stop and stand still. Then you just start looking for ways around this. Now, as I will remind people, I will do anything within my code of ethics to be successful. So please know I'm governed by a very intense structure of ethics, but within my code of ethics, I'm going to do anything. Now, once you have that mentality that I absolutely refuse to stop at a roadblock, then you'll understand what I mean by aggression. So hitting that, wanting that, hungering for that. So for instance, here's something I do that my lawyers hate, but I think it is absolutely unconscionable the way that attorneys act. And they will go off into their little zones and they will snipe at each other back and forth with all this ridiculous shit. So my team has an edict. You have 3 weeks to get the contract done without me. If you can't get the contract done without me, every stakeholder in this negotiation is going to get on the phone for a 2-hour call, and we are not getting off that call until every single detail has been worked out. Because what ends up happening is the lawyers are arguing over shit that nobody cares about. And so I will just speak directly to their client who is on the phone live. Hey, Timmy, I bet you care about this. I don't care about that. So I'm going to give that to you. But I really care about this thing over here. And I can't see why you care about it. Here's why I care about it. Are we good? I give you that. You give me this. Yes, we're good. Lawyers, tell me how you're going to draft it up. Oh, well, we'll have to. No. Draft it up right now. Give me the language that you plan to use. Okay, it's going to be something like this. Now, look, it pisses everybody off because I am a bull in a china shop. But I love that aggression. Now, can a woman do that? Yeah. Are they necessarily drawn to it as a gravitational center that they don't have to be pushed towards? Maybe not. Some will be. Some women are more aggressive than others. And so you just have to take that into consideration. So now you just start talking about bell curves. And so your normal average guy, given the level of testosterone, given the level of psychological reinforcement growing up, he's just way more prone to be turned on a little bit by that level of aggression, where it's like, I kind of like this. I want to step into this like this. I want to bring that energy. It is my natural state. And I actually find myself having to force myself to be gentle at other times. Okay, so that person's going to have a leg up in that. That's just their gravity. They're going to keep defaulting back to that. And it has supreme utility in business if it can be done in a thoughtful way where you understand everybody here is the hero of their own life. In fact, one thing, if you're negotiating, if you're firing somebody, you need to be thinking obsessively. How do I help them craft a story so when they go home to their wife, their kids, or whatever, that they still sound awesome and that they see what the next step is, right? Because if you can do that, now you've really got something. And I will do that with everybody, barring if they've done something fraudulent or attacked me or in some way. That's really, really important.
Wow. That remind the Stoic idea that the way out is through often, right? It sounded like you're basically assimilating the obstacle into your strategy, right? Where the game was originally 3 phases and that was going to impede your marketing of it. But instead you basically just adapt to the obstacle, right? And split it into 3 games. That's very important, I think, right? To not get so attached to, again, in this case, the objective or the vision or the target, that you're so tightly grasped to that you fail to adapt to the obstacles that you inevitably encounter. Interesting to think of it like that. So in Western society, the traits traditionally associated with masculinity, there's several, but I've narrowed it down to a few here. Strength, courage, independence, leadership, as you've said, and assertiveness in general. And I think when you say aggression, when you're saying you like aggression, it's sort of like an amalgam of those things, right? Like you're being strong, courageous, independently choosing the vision, you're leading people towards it, and you're being assertive in creating results. How do you think about each of those? like strength, courage, independence, leadership, assertiveness. Is that how you see masculinity? Is that how you see the path to being alpha? Are we leaving anything out? Is there anything you would change, modify? Like what is your view on that set of masculine traits?
Never built a paradigm around it. For me, everything is an echo of, on masculinity very specifically, there's an echo of two things. One, efficacy, and then two, aim. And so in this case, it's somebody saying, okay, I'm going to choose to value these traits in myself. So for instance, I don't value the same traits in my wife. And everybody gets to make a decision. Do I want to lean into a more masculine value set, or do I want to lean into a more feminine value set?
Right.
I don't think there's a right or wrong there. I think that there certainly is a need to face the reality of your biology.
Right.
In that, if you have the constant gravitational pull of the feminine, and you want to create, give life, nurture, connect, like all the things that make a traditional feminine temperamented person really valuable, because I think these are two things that are of equal value. And it becomes a question of, do you understand their role? Do you understand how it plays in the dyad? And the dyad between men and women is something I think people don't think a lot about, and how potent it is, and how they really are, they are two halves of a whole that, when are together in a high functioning way, are far more likely to be successful than when you just have them isolated on their own.
Complementary.
Yeah, very much so, in a really profound way. So anyway, it's a value set. You're choosing to reinforce those things in yourself. You're choosing to say, if I possess these things, then I get to respect myself. And then every day you either do those things or you don't do those things. You either do feel good about yourself or you don't feel good about yourself. But the highest order for me is efficacy. So if I need to be feminine to get something done, then I will be feminine to get it done. And when you're talking about leadership, it's really rare. I mean, look, Genghis Khan did a bang up job, and I imagine that the vast majority of the time, that was pretty masculine. But even he understood, okay, look, I'm going to give you an option. I can kill everyone in your town, burn it to the ground, and no one will ever know you or your ancestors. Or you guys can submit immediately, and then I'm actually going to give you a pretty good life, which he would do. And so then it was a question of, okay, well, coming in and absorbing their religion and not beating it out of them and letting the clerics be the clerics and celebrate their history and all that stuff. Is that a masculine energy or a feminine energy? That's being inclusive. That's embracing. It's also hyper strategic. And so that to me is, what does the moment demand? And so did not expect to quote two of the sort of most horrendous and yet accomplished military generals, but I'll follow it up with Napoleon, who said, put your iron fist inside of a velvet glove. And what he's getting at there is a time for diplomacy. If you go into every situation and all you do is throw your weight and anger around, you're just going to end up demeaning people, not making them cow before you. And if you do that to everyone you meet, they will be looking for the opportunity, especially if it's a man, to take their masculinity back from you. And that's how you get stabbed in the back. So people need to be really thoughtful that the chimps that try to rule their brood group, tribe, I forget what monkey, troops. We'll go with that. The ones that try to rule by force rule very briefly and are usually torn apart by other apes. So you want to be thoughtful, build alliances, and I think that's really, really smart. And so at first, as I went on my journey of toughening up and becoming more masculine, I was very tense about using my very deep toolkit of more feminine traits. And then I realized, actually, now that I've developed my masculine side, it is really useful to be able to go back and forth as the situation demands it.
So there, you said something about like listening to your biology, being true to your biology, but there is this epigenetic, epibiological component where you get to consciously cultivate either your masculinity or your femininity. That's very interesting. And actually, I think it's a good segue into my next question, because the paradox here in my mind for masculinity is like, sure, it is all those things, I think, right? Strength, courage, independence, leadership, assertiveness. But I think true masculinity, kind of like what you just said, means you must also be radically honest. And even if that means disclosing moments of emasculation, right? Like how to be honest when you have moments of weakness, how to be honest when you're feeling afraid, how to be honest when you're feeling dependent rather than independent, how to be honest when you're feeling like a failure as a leader, and how to be honest about feeling unassertive. Now, obviously, you don't want to go around on your bad days to your team and just say, I'm feeling all of these things, but I'm sure there's days where you're actually feeling that. So like, where's the line, I guess, between what you are choosing to reveal about your actual state and what you're choosing to, the front, or the veneer or the mask you're choosing to wear to continue to project that intoxication of certainty or that powerful leadership role? Like, how do you decide? And you're saying like it's a moment to moment thing, but like, how do you actually wrestle with the subtlety of revealing, I guess, taking the mask off or keeping the mask on?
I think it is really important to not wear a mask, in that you need to be an integrated strategist. And so, and it's interesting because I do hackle a little bit at saying the final description you were giving there, I would say, is an integrated whole person. And I think that it is wise to delineate between an integrated whole person and stepping into your masculine. So masculine energy or masculinity is a side of an equation. And I think that it is really important to understand how powerful a side that is. And there are many men that get lost because that becomes the only thing that they develop. And they certainly have a biological pull to that. And people that are more biologically weighted in that direction are more likely to get lost in just masculinity. But the reality is, in any given endeavor, there are times where that level of masculinity first isn't going to be the right play. And so part of what women will test for in a man is the ability to code shift between masculinity and femininity. And so to give a great example of that, I'm not looking for you to fix it. I just need you to hold space and hear me. That's a very feminine way to approach it. And they need to know that you can do that. Because for them to be an integrated whole, they have a way in which they must process verbally. And if you have a man that can go out and get the kill and hunt and protect them, keep the kids safe, amazing, perfect. You meet minimum requirements. But boy, oh boy, what they really would like is somebody that can do all of that, that can go into total berserker mode and slay. And I mean literally slay, kill, murder, anybody that would harm them or their children. But that can also then switch and be like, I'm here with you emotionally. I can hold this space for you emotionally. And it doesn't mean that you get emotional with them, but it does mean that you're able to hold that space, that you're not passing judgment on the feminine, that you're just like, hey, I get it. You're going through this. I value you as my equal. We are different, but I value you as my equal. Now that is a very feminine, very understanding, very space creating way. Now it isn't becoming feminine, but it is understanding that at this moment, a more feminine tool will be incredibly useful. And so I want people to understand that the context in which you do something is very important. So, and this is an idea that I talked to a Brazilian jiu-jitsu coach about. It's the guy that trained George St. Pierre. And he talked about, he said, Tom, I wanted to be able to walk away from a fight knowing that I could have won the fight and that I'm choosing to walk away. If I can't fight, I walk away, but I didn't have a choice. And I was like, damn. So if your masculine is developed, then you can step into a feminine energy and be like, I'm doing it within the context of being strong, of being grounded. I am the rock upon which the waves of your emotions can crash. But men will often do that with a roll of the eye instead of saying, no, this is a totally different energy that evolution has said you need both. And so for you to be judgmental, to want to push it away, to not want to find a way to coexist, I think is a huge mistake. And so for anybody that wants to be married and have a successful marriage, you really do want a partner that you have to quote unquote contend with. Thank you, Jordan Peterson, for that language. I think it's a brilliant way to think about it. And so that's how I really begin to delineate between as a fully actualized male, I need to be able to fight and be covered in blood in 1 minute. And then I need to go remember that I don't have kids, but people will get why I say this. For my daughter to become well-adjusted, she has to see a human return to the eyes. After that, she has to see somebody who wants to love and connect and protect, to sit down and drink fake tea with her and the teddy bears. You know what I mean? It's like that is the full range of what a human is capable of.
Right.
And the person that can do all of that is going to be able, again, my obsession with efficacy, is going to be able to make the people in their lives feel the way that they want to feel. Loved, safe, secure, understood, seen, protected. And I don't think kids want, as a father, a sentry, a bodyguard. I don't think that's what wives want. But they want a lover, a partner, that is capable of protecting and loving and being open. And so going back to the idea of, wearing a mask and when do you let the mask slip, I would much rather my team think of me as a robot that just can't be stopped, that will be there for them whenever they need me. But that has to come through my actions. So they just see that I can't be broken rather than me hiding who I am. And so when I don't know something, I will say, I'm not sure what the answer is here, but I'm going to get that answer to you. And then I really am going to give them the answer and I'm going to do it quickly. And if I'm honest, I'm going to do it faster than they could have done it for themselves. And so over and over and over, they see somebody who's not afraid to say, I'm not sure. They see somebody who's not afraid to say, oh, that's actually a better idea than my idea. But that they come to that very quickly. They don't stumble over it. Their emotions are never out of control. And that they steer the company in the right direction as measured by KPIs.
Right.
And if you can do that, then even though you're showing vulnerabilities sometimes, that they're like, this is a real human that I think is amazing and has led me where I want to go time and again and makes me feel the way I want to feel.
It's great. The theme I'm picking up here is this, you've already said it basically, but a relentless focus on creating results by any means necessary within the frame of ethics, right? Which I assume is probably basic Christian ethics, right? So like, don't steal, don't kill. Maybe you have some other ones, but I assume that's what you mean. Correct me if I'm wrong. And that is masculine in a way. And there's a paradox, right? Because if you need to put the iron fist in the velvet glove to get the thing done, right? To be feminine in a moment or in a certain context, well, then that's paradoxically actually the masculine thing to do because you're creating results.
Yeah, that to me feels like not as useful a way to look at it, because unless you have a breakdown of all the amazing things that the feminine is there for, but where I see us deranging the conversation now is that men have been told that all those masculine traits, the aggression, all of that is toxic, and then the feminine is celebrated to high heaven. And the reality is they are both tools, and evolution wielded those tools by giving a lot to one in one direction, a lot to the other in the other direction, but certainly made either capable of stepping in, whether temporarily or otherwise. A woman can step into a masculine energy, a man can step into a feminine energy. And so I think of it more as tools and gravitational center. And so as a guy, I have a gravitational center towards strength, protection, aggression, pursuit. That's something that people don't talk a lot about. So ambition, being wildly competition, wanting to compete with people, wanting to get strong, be strong, wanting the ability to dominate others, even if I don't exercise it. All of that. I just have an innate, it's in me, push to that. And when I am out of alignment with that, I feel a sense of dis-ease that no matter how much society tells me, no, those things are bad, I still feel that profound sense of dis-ease. Something feels wrong because evolution has an algorithm running in my brain that I ought to do those things. And we can talk about the body and how if anybody out there is feeling like, oh, no, all that masculine stuff, that's bullshit. Yeah, bro, let me put on 15 pounds of lean muscle to you. And all of a sudden you're gonna be like, yo, this is the shit. There's just something about, you'll realize, whoa, there's this ancient algorithm running in my brain
Yeah.
that rewards me for being strong, that was somewhere in the back of your mind punishing you for being weak. It's really fascinating. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, anyway, you can have tools on either side, but you will for sure have a gravitational center that's pulling you.
Right.
I just want people to understand that until we have a compelling vision of why masculinity is cool, that boys can run after hard and fast, and a compelling vision of femininity that women can run after hard and fast, that are legitimately cool things.
Yeah.
Because getting them to feel like my job is to stay at home, probably not the vibe. But if it's you create life, you will, for the first, call it 11 to 12 years, you're going to shape that child in a way that nothing ever again will ever have the ability to shape them.
Right.
And if they're like, whoa, this tremendous sense, and this is where I don't believe in God, but I love speaking in language of divinity. Like if you recognize that as this divine responsibility, that quite literally you feed that child from your body, that quite literally you have organs that allow you to give birth to an alien inside of you. It is insane. And that 15% of women have a fourth photoreceptor that allow them to see colors that men legitimately can't see, probably so that they could see different colors in the child's skin, so they could detect very early if there's a problem. I mean, just like all kinds of things that women are just wired to do this incredibly miraculous thing, that all through time, women were known as the sort of mysterious creators, that there is this sort of fascinating divinity to the feminine. And there's this fascinating earthen quality to strength, to volatility in males that is really interesting. And if we both learn to harness them rather than be their puppets, and we learn to work together, then it gets really fascinating. And then the ultimate integrated person is the one that can do both. A woman that can be masculine when it need be and feminine when she can. Because things are more in balance, and a man that is just by default strong and prepared, but at the same time can love a child being silly and can engage in that in a way that he would never consider demeaning.
Yeah, the adaptivity and the versatility of the integrated individual is just superior to someone that is fixed in one way or the other, right? If you're just feminine or just masculine, well, then you're potentially maladapted to certain situations. And so it's interesting to think of it that way. But then again, even that's contextual, because sometimes you need to just hold on to the masculinity and push through whatever the thing is.
This is why sociopaths are real.
Yeah.
If you're a Viking and your village is out of women and you need to go to that next village to get access to women and resources, you don't want people that are like, bro, but I feel so bad about killing this guy. Like he's got kids too. You want somebody who's just an unrepentant slaughter machine.
Yeah.
And while I say that with an anthropologist's detachment, because if that person came into my house, I would not be happy about it.
Sure, of course.
But when you have them on your team and they are killing the people trying to kill your family, all of a sudden it's like, that's why these guys exist.
Yeah. There is this Darwinian animal aspect to being human, and that seems to underlie a lot of this masculine, feminine division of labor, if we could call it that, right? Like when you are doing what role is largely dependent on what your circumstances are, right? Like the fact that you can sit there and hold space for your wife, well, that presupposes a lot of things. Like you're comfortable, you're sitting inside, your needs are met. You have the luxury of sitting there and talking versus trying to survive in the wilderness or whatever the thing may be. So,
and you don't have a value that women are these dumb, infantile creatures.
Yeah.
You're like, this is my peer.
Yeah.
This is my equal. We do different things.
Yeah.
We are tools for different uses.
Yeah.
But I don't think my value more than hers.
Right.
And so therefore, when she's doing a very feminine thing, I'm not going to be mad about it.
Of course.
But I'm also not going to pretend, I don't find that interesting. I don't want to spend a ton of time in that space. And so to be a good partner, I'm going to hold space for you, but I'm not going to get emotional with you. And as long as we can strike that balance, because nothing makes my wife happier than when I share the emotion. And I'm like, that is a bridge too far. I cannot offer you that. I'm not going to fake feeling something that I don't feel. One, because I value my just emotional sobriety. I don't get wildly emotional. I'm not saying I don't have emotions, but I am saying that it's pretty hard to push me in any direction in any meaningful way. Like I'm just steady state. I know what I'm trying to accomplish and I'm going to go after it. So I do create boundaries, and I think that's important for men and women, in that I'm not going to come be emotional with you, but I'm not going to treat your emotions as if they are a sign of a defect.
Right. No, it totally makes sense. The farm at Okefenokee is a revolutionary new regenerative agricultural community. It features an 8,000 tree olive orchard, which they use to make their own olive oil, as well as a very large pecan orchard. All the animals on the farm are heritage animals, with some varieties over 100 years old and others thousands of years old. Fresh eggs are produced daily by the farm's chickens. Also, there are over 1,000 beehives that pollinate the over 200 heirloom fruits and vegetables and provide honey to all the residents. The farm makes its own molasses, unrefined sugar, herbs, and spices. The farm also features an herbal apothecary and a commercial kitchen. These are just a few reasons why the farm is the healthiest place on earth. To learn more about the healthiest place on earth, go to okefarm.com and use discount code BREEDLOVE for $21,000 off custom cabin pricing. Again, to learn more about the farm at Okefenokee, go to okefarm.com and be sure to tell them I sent you. Forget multivitamins and other supplements. Animal organs are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. You can get 100 times more nutrients from organs than you can from muscle meats. But the problem with eating organs is that they are difficult to find in stores, they are difficult to prepare, and even when they are prepared well, they often don't taste great. Thankfully, Heart and Soil Supplements has made consuming organ meats so much easier by providing powderized organs in capsule form. Organ meats include everything your body needs to thrive: vitamins, minerals, peptides, proteins, and growth factors. This is why organ meats were the most prized foods for our ancestors. Fortunately for us, Heart and Soil makes these treasured foods easily accessible. So go to heartandsoil.co today and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get started on your journey to optimal health and vitality. Again, that's heartandsoil.co, discount code BREEDLOVE. I'd like to thank my friends at Swan Bitcoin for their long-standing support of the What is Money show. Swan's mission is to help millions of people get into Bitcoin, so they built the best solution to set up recurring Bitcoin buys and automatic withdrawals into cold storage. With the Swan app, it takes just 2 minutes to sign up and start buying Bitcoin. If you're a new customer, you get $10 in free Bitcoin for signing up, and the first $10,000 of Bitcoin you buy incurs zero fees. If you're an existing Swan customer, then the next $10,000 of Bitcoin you buy now incurs zero fees. So if you love to recommend Bitcoin to friends and family, then Swan is the best place to start. So go to swanbitcoin.com/breedlove to get started today. Again, that's swanbitcoin.com/breedlove. Let's talk about the second sense of the word alpha. So in Wall Street, they use this term to just, there's alpha, which is basically you're outperforming the benchmark, typically the S&P 500 or whatever it may be, and beta would just be the market neutral returns, like holding the S&P 500. A lot of this alpha male cultivation has helped you in your life, right? Going from a place where you had no money to a place where you've now become very successful. So how have you thought about, I guess, investment opportunities, handling your money in the context of cultivating your masculinity? Like, is this something, I know a lot of guys hand it off to their wife. A lot of people sort of tag team it. Some guys do it themselves. Like, how do you think about handling the financial dimension of life in the context of your own masculine development?
So investing money makes me mad. And you and I met because I inadvertently had to go on a journey of investing money. Let me explain why it makes me mad. I love that I'm good at making money. Mm-hmm. anybody who thinks making money and making money investing are the same thing is out of their mind. And once I realized, oh, I have to invest my money because this is a corrupt system where my money is being stolen from me. Then I was like, this is bullshit. I shouldn't have to do this. I don't find it interesting. I do not want to spend time here. I want to be able to put my money in a bank. And if I don't spend $1 million, that 10 years, 50 years from now, that $1 million has the same purchasing power that it has today. And so I would gladly outsource investing to my wife if she were good at it. The bad news is she is not. She has no interest in getting better. She's plenty smart. She might even be better at math than me. But she just does not find it interesting whatsoever. Because I consider myself an artist first, like that's my actual identity. Nobody thinks of me that way. But I got into business so I could control the art. So I went to film school. That was my whole shtick. My sort of innate sense of myself is that of the writer. And so I just want to build businesses so that I can be creative, so that I can bring something into existence that didn't exist before. That's where I want to spend my time and my energy. And I got into investing because when COVID hit, I didn't know what money printing was. So I just heard we're going to be closing a bunch of businesses. And I knew over the course of my life, I've had well over 3,000 employees at this point, and 1,000 of them grew up very hard in the inner cities. They know nothing about money. They know nothing about finances. These are the people that live paycheck to paycheck. I actually had a couple people quit the first time because this was their first real job. Long story why, but I was hiring ex-convicts. And so they'd never really had a straight job before. And so they'd never paid tax before. So they'd never had a tax return before. And so they got their tax return and thought, I am rich. And they quit. And they were just like, oh my God, I've got $3,000. Like, this is crazy. Never had $3,000 in my life. And so they would quit. And I was like,
this was at Quest?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm like, these people are about to get eaten alive by what's about to happen. And so I was like, okay, I want to start doing financial content. And at the same time, now I'm like learning about this thing called Web3. And I'm like, oh, this, the blockchain, like this is really interesting. And as a game developer, I was like, hold on, this is going to be revolutionary. So I become obsessed with two things at once, the blockchain and investing money. Now, originally I get into investing money because I think, hey, I'm going to teach these guys the basics of investing in the S&P 500, like the really basic stuff that they can do that's going to protect them and their families, and they're going to be all good. And then I'm looking at the blockchain, which of course leads you to Bitcoin. And then I'm like, wait, hold on. What is money? How does all this work? And then, as no one knows better than you begin going down a really rage-inducing rabbit hole. And the more I learned about money, the more I realized, wow, we've created a system that no one's going to be hearing this for the first time. They'll know you so well, this won't land. But please, dear listener of the What is Money podcast, remember the vast, 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 vast majority of the world does not understand that money printing steals money from them. They don't understand it. And as somebody who didn't understand it until like 12 months ago, I empathize. So I believe the only reason that I have to think about, as somebody who's good at making money, the only reason I have to think about investing money is because we've created a system that steals from you. So you have to find a way to reinvest your capital so you can beat the theft.
Right.
That's absurd on its face and at a level that really lights me on fire. So the way that I invest my money is predominantly into things that I can control, the things that I can build. Beyond that, I am not a person that people should take investing advice from, but I'll happily tell people what I do. So what I do is I try to understand the essence of the thing. And so when I look at the essence of the thing, I ask myself, okay, is there a monetary system that has defeated the flaws of the current system that steals from me? That appears to be Bitcoin. And so my biggest single investment by far is in Bitcoin. I also believe in gold, but it's very disproportionate to what I have in Bitcoin. But the reason I believe in gold is for the exact same reason that I believe in Bitcoin, except for the fact that you can't move it around as easily.
Right.
I am not as compelled as many other people are that the government can't seize your Bitcoin. The government can and will seize any fucking thing they want, including the literal neurons in your brain. Should they so decide, they will beat you to death for your money, or maybe they'll start with your kids. Like, boys and girls, if you have not read the Gulag Archipelago, if you've not read about the rise and fall of the Third Reich, if you've not read about Mao's China, there was somebody, read The Red Famine if you really want to get excited. And in it, like, there was this one guy in the Gulag Archipelago system that they were trying to break, and they just couldn't break him. It's really fascinating. Some people will actually let themselves be tortured to death. It's amazing. But as you think about how safe your Bitcoin is, remember this story, please. Okay, this is a real story. This actually happened. And this happened in like 1940 or something. This wasn't like ancient history. And it's less than 100 years ago. They could not break this guy. Now, pulling out his fingernails, shoving needles under his fingernails, pulling out teeth, beating him, keeping him awake. I mean, just on and on and on and on and on. So he won't break. So they bring in his 16-year-old daughter and they gang rape her in front of him. Would you actually keep your Bitcoin safe as they're raping your 16-year-old daughter? If you would, you're a monster. So, and look, obviously they're monsters. And obviously we all wish that we lived in a world where people would never do that. But we don't. We live in a world where fucking people do that. And if people somehow have convinced themselves that we are at the end of history and things like that don't happen anymore, you are out of your fucking mind. So I'm just saying, nothing is safe. Nothing. Now, there are things that are safer than others. And this is why I'm a big proponent of Bitcoin. But it just... The reality is, the reason that I'm into Bitcoin is that when I look into the future, tomorrow is more digital than today. When I think about what a kid growing up today will just take as de rigueur, I just think they'll take digital money, for lack of a better word, as just obviously.
The norm.
Yeah, of course. So I just think every generation is going to adopt it more aggressively. It can't be inflated, which is why I love it. It creates currently a separation between governments and money. So just all the things that make me love that. I'm trying out a new idea. I haven't heard any compelling arguments against this, but I can feel that it doesn't land with people when I say it. But I believe that one of our inalienable rights should be that you can save in a currency that can't be inflated. And
I mean, at least have the option to.
Yeah. So it just
because,
seems
if
insane
you just
to me.
took Bitcoin as the example there, it's like to try and outlaw people's access to saving in something that can't be inflated, which in the strict sense of the word inflation, right? The only thing you can't increase the supply of on the face of the earth, so far as I know, is Bitcoin. To restrict people's access to that is to restrict people's access to software, which is to restrict people's access to speech. So it's, when you're saying that it's a fundamental human right, I would say, yes, it's the First Amendment in the United States.
Yeah, and I mean, look, there's maybe a little bit of gymnastics in that, and it might rule that way, and I'd be all for it. But I would love to see an amendment that just says government shall not infringe one's right to store wealth in an asset that cannot be inflated.
How about to own any asset? Like what ownership should ever be made illegal? I just can't.
It's a good question. That I don't know because I have not thought through it, and I can feel that I have tremendous blind spots, so I won't even answer that. I'm trying to, in a very early in my thought process way, get people to understand that it should be an inalienable right to be able to save in a currency that can't be inflated. Now, right now, you're as far from that as you can get in the government's option that they get you to save in and pay in and get taxed in and all of that. And that to me is a real problem. It's a real problem.
Yeah, for sure. So kind of going backwards, but I think it pertains to what you just said, because you described the Bitcoin or the what is money rabbit hole rather as a rage inducing rabbit hole, which it absolutely is if you've never well, the first time you go into it, how could you not be mad, right?
Yeah.
Like it's the biggest scam in the history of the human race, as far as I can tell. Going somewhat backwards, because I wanted to ask you about this, but I didn't, but now I really want to. You mentioned the not getting emotionally involved, not getting emotional, right? When you said your wife is sitting there wanting you to share the feeling and you're like, no, I'm just going to be the rock on which your emotional waves can crash. I can relate to that. But the one exception for me personally, and the one I struggle with, is anger, is rage. How do you, I assume that's an emotion. The one thing I know about it it's ambivalent to other emotions in that its valence can be either positive or negative. Or like, joy, happiness, elation, these things are always positive. Sadness, anxiety, fear, these things are always negative. But anger is somewhere on the cusp. They can actually be negative if, I guess, pointed in the wrong direction maybe, but can also give you positive emotions, right? It can energize. The example I take from Christ is like what I call righteous anger, right? There's one time in the Bible where he goes ape shit, and that's flipping the money changers' tables. And so that's anger directed at a resolution. So that seems to be useful, physical anger. How do you think about anger and rage, and how do you channel it in a way that's constructive or results oriented?
Well, so that is how I think of it. It is a tool that is caustic. So the more you use anger, the more it will hurt you, but it is really good at what it does. And so in terms of anger is the thing that switches off fear. So when you have righteous indignation, you will charge towards that thing. And so I just look at everything from an evolutionary lens. Nature's like, okay, I'm going to give you this thing called fear. I'm going to make sure that you don't run headlong into every stupid fight and get yourself killed. But at the same time, I'm going to have a countervailing weight, because there's going to be some times where it is the only option is to attack this thing head on. And if I can imbue you with something where this is so wrong, so unjust, you're eating my child, whatever, that you just become blinded by rage. And now you are completely fearless. The adrenaline allows you to be stronger than you would otherwise be. And you throw yourself headlong into a fight. And it is utterly fascinating. You can see this with smaller animals going up against bigger animals. If the bigger animal's like not starving and it doesn't really, have like a big thing to be concerned about, when the smaller animal comes at it like with just that ferocity, it'll just back off, because it's like, whoa. Like, you may not kill me, but you might take my eye out.
Yeah.
And so I don't want, like, whatever it is you want, you clearly want badly.
Right.
And so all of this stuff goes back to the idea of you need an integrated whole.
Yeah.
And so if you are incapable of anger, you will be taken advantage of in your life for sure.
Yeah.
If you are constantly angered, you will actually die earlier, because you're just constantly pumping cortisol. So it is a very caustic emotion.
Yeah.
But what I find, and the way that I use it in my life, is as I assure my team, if you ever see me angry, to some extent, it is a theatrical display, because I'm still in control. However, I'm not faking it. I'm really mad. And I'm choosing to let it out because I understand how humans work. And you, at times, need to show the world the level, the amplitude of your position. Like, I don't kind of feel like this is important. I'm ready to knock tables over and to smash shit and to make sure that people know that I'm here like for real. But you better use that based on its efficacy. And so when I see people using anger and it's no longer efficacious, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, this is not the time for that, because you're just going to end up in a spiral. Because if you lash out like that, it is escalatory, and the other side is going to escalate back. And this is going to end up being a question of who is legitimately more angry. Like, are you going to escalate to the point where you die, to the point where you're broken? Like this, it is very primal in that we're saying I'm throwing off the yoke of civilization. And if punches are thrown or weapons are involved, I'm here for that. And so this is why I think women use that tactic far more often than men, because for the most part, it's maybe breaking down a little bit now, But for the most part, historically, they knew I'm not going to get into a fight. And men were like, that isn't true for me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to find exit ramps. I'm going to try to find a way out of this because it really will come to blows.
Yeah.
And look, on any given Sunday, like even if you're a great fighter, you get caught in just the wrong way from a shot you didn't see coming. You go down head trauma, your life may never be the same.
Yeah.
So anger is one of those things that you're playing a poker game. And if you break that out, you better be pretty sure that it's not going to cause a runaway train of escalation, or that if it does, that you feel so seriously about this that you will ride that train of escalation all the way to its destination. And when people have both of those tools in their pocket, they really are prepared to ride that train all the way to its destination, and they're good at it, right? They've got the tools to back it up. Then it can be very, very useful if used very judiciously by a person who has shown a high degree of effectiveness in non-anger-based confrontations.
How do you said you will occasionally show or release your anger when you feel that it needs to be shown or demonstrated? I get perhaps to indicate the sense of urgency, right, about certain things that need to get done. How do you maintain control and not get carried away by the anger? Because that seems to be where a lot of young men get caught, right? It's like the anger comes up and their rationality go down, right? Like the anger starts to carry them away and they can actually become irrational. I think this is, and it's, again, there's a paradox here because, again, masculinity is typically associated with being more rational, level-headed, et cetera, less chaotic, more ordered. But in this one particular area, men tend to be more prone to anger than women, and they can lose their rationality in that display. So how do you maintain control while simultaneously releasing the anger energy or displaying it?
Yeah, using it would probably be the word that I would say. So it goes like this. It is entirely possible that through a fluke of genetics and epigenetics that I'm just particularly good at never losing sight of my aim. But I've never done anything stupid while drinking alcohol. I don't get out of control with my emotions. I've never said anything hurtful to my wife in a fit of rage. So there is something to just the whatever lucky roll of the dice that I got where I can always pull back and stop the thing from going off. And now I'm not in control of it. It is in control of me. So I don't know that I would be wise to claim any.
Has it ever gone away from you? Has your anger ever gotten the best?
Since I was 12, no.
Wow.
Fantastic. I once flipped over a lawnmower because I didn't want to mow the lawn. That was pretty fucking dumb, and I was not in control in that moment, but I was also 12. So no, pretty early on, I began to realize, there are behaviors that get me what I want, and there are behaviors that feel good, but they don't get me what I want.
Right.
And so one of the core tenets of my life is don't trust your emotions. So just because I feel really mad doesn't mean that I should enact that anger because one, I may be wrong. I may be just misreading this situation. Maybe anger right now is completely inappropriate. And because I distrust my emotions, I tend not to give in to them. And then even when an emotion is really felt in me, I'm able to go, it's probably not going to help your grand vision of what you're trying to accomplish to enact that emotion. But that means that I understand how enacting my emotions will make people feel. So the times that I let it go are times where if I'm showing anger, I'm almost certainly trying to display two things. One, that I feel incredibly strongly about this. And as a person who's constantly like, no, like it's your idea. Let's do what you want to do because I want to keep the team involved in everything. And I never start with anger. So I only get to anger when anger feels like it's now the useful thing.
Right.
So that's important. And then the second thing is anger has a way of snapping people to attention.
For sure, yeah.
And so if somebody, for instance, displays anger to me, I don't display anger back. I stop and go, okay, yeah, I need to figure out why you're this angry because you're giving me a cue. It's one of those cues that's not really socially acceptable. So the fact that you're like using this cue, I'm taking it as a call for help. Where you're saying, I'm not being heard.
Right.
And as long as I don't feel like you played that card at a weird place,
Right.
I watched it escalate.
Right.
I watched how you were trying to diffuse. It wasn't working. And now you display a flash, because that's normally far better than really going crazy. But you're displaying a flash of anger. Now I go, interesting. I respect this person. They're doing a flash of anger. I don't understand it. So let me assess rather than coming back at them. And so since I know I'm never going to display anger in front of somebody for whom I have not earned a tremendous amount of respect, for somebody where I haven't made a ton of deposits in the relationship bank. So when I display the anger, they'll have an opportunity to go, interesting. I don't yet understand this situation. And I'm not afraid of him as a person. So this isn't a moment now where I'm like cowering with fear. Now it's a level of seriousness I need to pay attention.
Right.
And so if you use it like that, it can be very effective. And then look, there have been times, like I said before, when I had a bunch of ex-convicts working for me, where anger was a very useful tool because it was a language they understood.
Right.
And so I will often joke with my employees at Impact Theory, you guys couldn't hang with the Tom that ran Quest because it was thugs, it was gang members.
Yeah.
We had rival Bloods and Crips working on the same production line, and I had to keep them working together and moving in the right direction. And so that was a very different version of myself.
That's incredible. This idea that, because the other thing is, the more you play that card, the more diminished it is, right? If someone's getting angry about every little thing, well, then eventually you're just like, okay, this isn't, you're inflating the power of the anger, if you will. So seeing that it's used in a escalation that makes sense, or a context that makes sense, and seeing that it's invoked when when people they need to be heard, right? You're kind of pushing the envelope one step closer to the possibility of physical violence, which is why it gets everyone's attention, right? You kind of snap out of purely propositional logic mode, and it's a little bit more like, hey, this is real, pay attention. And so, learning how to harness that as a tool rather than be harnessed by that is definitely very important. Going back to the market idea of alpha, how do you think about risk? Like, in terms of, obviously you're doing a lot of creative things, you're very entrepreneurial, you actually live at the edge of uncertainty all the time, right? You're constantly trying new things. The nature of experimentation is that most of these things fail, or they don't work out as originally envisioned, typically. So how do you think about risk, and then how do you manage it in your affairs?
Yeah, so I have a excruciatingly high tolerance for risk. Again, I don't know that I earned that, but I have certainly put rules in place to ensure that I capture that advantage that I have. So I have a rule in my life that I don't stand still. So if I'm unsure of which way to go and there are 9 paths before me, I'm going to pick one. And I'm going to do my best to pick the right one, but I know that sort of got a 1 in 9 shot, and it just is what it is. And I have paid a tremendous price for that in blood, in treasure, but I've also made an obscene amount of money. So it's like, okay, like on balance, this appears to be a very good strategy. So I think it is really important that people be honest with themselves about their level of risk tolerance. So for instance, my wife has a much lower risk tolerance than I have. And so in some ways I use her as a backstop to keep me from getting really out of hand. So I don't know if you know, Francis Ford Coppola directed The Godfather, just one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. I think he's 82 now, and he just bet his entire fortune again on a new movie called Megalopolis. And I mean, that's just That's balls, man. That's somebody with real risk
He's
appetite.
funding the entire film himself.
Yeah. It's like $130 million.
Holy shit.
Yeah, it's crazy.
What was the last one he did in that way?
Oh, the last one he did in that way was Wild Hearts, I think, which was a catastrophic failure. But the one he did before that was Apocalypse Now, which he's made over $100 million off of.
Wow.
So it's like he's had some success, he's had some radical failures, but all in, I mean, the fact that he had a net worth of whatever, 120, 130 million, that he was able to liquidate everything to do it again, I think is pretty fascinating and just really interesting. And his wife passed away not too long ago. And so how much of this was like, it got me thinking about, because I said I use my wife as the brakes. And it just got me thinking that was the passing of his wife where he's like, okay, well now if I make myself poor, only I suffer. So I'm willing to take this risk again. Is pretty fascinating.
How does that work then? Are you, before you deploy capital or decide to embark on a certain thing, I mean, it's probably not everything, I would imagine, but maybe things over a certain size or threshold that you're then talking to your wife about it when you say use her as the
so
brakes?
my wife is my partner in the deepest sense of the word. So I want her opinion, even if just how do we do this better?
Yeah.
She's so smart. So I'll just be like, hey, here's an idea that I'm thinking about. But I know you don't take my wife an idea that needs to be nurtured. You take my wife an idea that is stable and needs to be attacked. And so I'll go to her and say, here's this thing that I love, I've thought a lot about, I think is ready to go. What do you think? And then she'll be like, well, hold on, you'd have to do this and you have to do that. And how are you going to accomplish this? And so then she'll sharpen my thinking. And I'll either go, yeah, okay, this isn't going to work. Or, ooh, great things you pointed out. Here's how I'm going to solve those. And so she allows us to thought exercise our way out of spending even more money.
Right.
So it does come down to, in that instance, you need to understand what the other person is good at.
Right.
And so you personally, I would not want a partner who I thought of as a nag or whatever. Like I'm trying to keep this from her because what the fuck does she know?
Right.
It's like I married somebody that is like a ninja level at entrepreneurship, and I'm just like, yo, I know you're not good at breathing life into an idea, and she knows that. But she's extremely good at understanding how an idea will need to be executed. And so she'll hit you with those things. You're like, oh, damn, I didn't think about that. Okay, yeah, I'm very glad that you're pointing that out now. And so she makes sure that ideas are far more robust before we begin. So
it's qualitative feedback, but you're not getting her permission to deploy capital. Because I'm thinking of
we have a
the
very
typical guy that's like,
relationship.
oh, I need to ask my wife before I spend. Like, how do you approach that?
So just to address that thing head on.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of guys have a very unhealthy relationship with their wife. They may also be saying that just as a way to put people off. Like, I don't want to tell you, I don't want to do it. So let me go talk to my wife. Or they may feel powerless in their ability to persuade their wife.
Right.
They may like risk, but be bad at it. And so over time, they've realized every time I've ignored my wife, this has failed. And so they've really lost faith in themselves. And so that's somebody who, the lesson they should have learned is I don't understand the essence of this thing. And so I don't yet know what I'm good at, or I have not yet developed the skills that I need to get good at to be able to take advantage of these other opportunities. And the wife who just has a protective, like protect me, protect my family, protect my nest, protect my children, will just have a naturally defensive posture. And a defensive posture is almost always the safe posture.
Right.
And so you won't end up taking advantage of opportunities. So you're not going to have my kind of lifestyle.
Right.
But I could go broke playing the way that I play. But if you listen to her, you won't. You at least won't end up being broke. You may play your life small, but your kids are going to make it through high school. They're, with a roof over their head and food in their stomachs. And so it's like, once you understand, oh, that's the role she's meant to play. So now it's like, okay, that's probably a good filter. And this is probably why men and women are better together. This is probably why men live longer lives when they're married than when they're not. So it's like, okay, this sort of checks and balances system is probably a good idea. So the way I think of it is, I'm not going to check with my wife. I'm going to check with one of the smartest people that I know who has eyes on a thing that I know historically I am blind to. And so I am very good at vision. I am very good at getting people excited. I'm very good at what they call in sailing velocity made good. I know how to angle the sails in a particular way to capture the momentum of the wind at such an angle that I actually end up where I wanted to be, not just the direction that the wind is blowing. Now, most people can't do that. But at the same time, I'm likely to be blindsided by something like, yeah, but you know there's a reef 100 yards out. And if you don't aim for this one exact spot, your boat's going to get torn apart. Oh shit, no, I didn't know that. So yeah, let me show you where the reef is. Just avoid all those. Go through here and you're going to be fine. And now I'm like, thank God I went to this person who is so good at a thing that I'm blind to, because I'm just so eager to capture the wind. I'm not thinking about the thing that's below the water.
Right.
And so this is why, dude, don't just marry a chick that's hot. Marry somebody who you respect intellectually, or just know I'm going to bifurcate my life completely. And my wife's brilliance is kids and rearing children and all of that. And she's just not going to be able to help me on the other side. Figure out, but you want somebody that on balance, they're not good at what you're good at, but they bring something of such tremendous value to the relationship that it is effortless for you to worship at their feet, to just be like, I'm so grateful that you're in my life. And they should effortlessly worship at your feet. And if you don't both look at each other with just awe and admiration, what are you doing? Because a relationship is compromise on compromise on compromise. And why on God's green earth would you ever do that if it wasn't for somebody that you're like, this person is unbelievably good at something that A, I'm not good at, and B, that I respect.
It's well said. So, third sense of the word alpha, like alpha and omega. And under this particular department of the word alpha, I'm trying to capture like ancient wisdom, mythology, ethics, wisdom, etc. So, you've mentioned a few times today that you'll do anything that it takes to create results within your frame of ethics. So maybe we could just start with that. Like, what is your ethical framing on the world? Is it informed by religion or Christianity more specifically? We've even had recently Richard Dawkins, right? The father of rational atheism, came out and said, he's culturally a Christian, which I thought was fascinating. So if you could speak to, I guess, your personal ethical frame, and then what, if any, relation do you think it has to, let's say, traditional wisdom traditions or religion?
Yeah, so I think that wherever you grew up is going to be in your DNA in a way that is just deep and profound. So for me to say that I'm not culturally Christian would be, I think, delusional. So grew up Christian, grew up in a Christian country, think Jesus had a good vibe. Like if you're here for the vibes, Jesus got you covered. So, all of that certainly seeped in. I, however, studied Eastern philosophy far more hardcore.
Is this Taoism or
yes?
Okay, yeah.
So, in fact, at one point, called myself a Taoist.
Okay.
So went pretty deep on that. But I think moral philosophy for me, and I'll be interested to see how your audience responds to this. I think Sam Harris has the right idea about moral philosophy, that it does not need to be tethered to religion. And I think the reality is the reason that religion is so powerful, and the reason that I'm so glad that Jordan is just banging the drum about a return to religion, is that religion, as far as I can tell, is the only medium through which really good ideas can travel through time in a meme form that works across all levels of intellect.
That's well said.
And once you realize that you have to get this not only across time, but across all levels of intellect, you realize, we need a very specific packaging mechanism for this. And religion works exceedingly well.
Right.
It is the thing that is born of the way the human mind works.
Right.
It stood the test of time. And so I'm not at all surprised that people are returning to it, even though from a scientific standpoint, they kind of can't justify it. It's like we know these things aren't true. And so you have to find a way to reconcile that. But I've seen the brightest minds in the world find ways to embrace it. And I've seen people that just from a pure mathematical standpoint, they are, they don't meet minimum requirements intellectually, to put it in a nice way. The military, for instance, does not allow people with an IQ of under 83 in the military because they're more of a liability. So you can imagine when somebody says, you're not even worth getting shot because you will cause so many problems before you get there. So there is a legal definition of a moron. And so I will invoke that now. So whether you're a moron or a super genius, religion is the medium by which those memes will carry forward, just more profoundly than anything else. So, but it isn't necessary. So you can still recognize that that's just the medium by which the memes that were already true and useful are getting transmitted. So if you have a North Star and that North Star is honorable, and I'll define honorable very simply, that you are pursuing an aim that uplifts you and other people. So it can't just be good for you. It has to be good for you and the tribe. Now, nothing is going to be good for everybody. So this gets very complicated very quickly, and we can spend all day with trolley problem edge cases, and everybody's just going to do their best, and there's always going to be tragedy, and you're always going to make a choice that would leave you in tears because you can't believe you had to choose between those two things, and isn't life cruel? So all of that's going to be just as true with my belief system as anybody else's. But ultimately, I'm trying to push people towards human flourishing. I think Sam Harris has the right idea when he says that we certainly know that the world being the maximum amount of pain and suffering for everyone is the thing you can use as your anchor of this is bad. This is what we want to avoid, that religion would call hell. And the thing that we should aim for, everything being maximally good for everyone all the time, is the thing that we should aim for, and religion would call that heaven. So it's like you still get the bracketing, you still get a sense that I think we would all just agree that there are those chemical states. Now, of course, there are going to be edge cases where you have somebody who legitimately their life is better by watching the misery and suffering of others, and even better still if they get to cause and watch the suffering of others, and some people are wired for that. But that is not an honorable goal because that only uplifts them and does not uplift the tribe around them. So that's where just a pretty simple frame to me gets you pointed in a very right direction. And I think that philosophy, while really fun, gets into such esoteric territory as to no longer be useful. So when people push back on what I just said, the only pushback I ever hear is it's something like, well, how do you really know that doing a thing that makes people feel good is actually good for them, or they actually feel the way that you think they do? And how do you know that it isn't just like a robot that's making the right faces and grunts so that you read that to be good for them, but in reality, they're not? And so there's no way to anchor all of this. To me, that's just a nonsensical string of words. Ultimately, we all know that we can feel better or worse, that certain situations, like being tortured, is worse. Watching your 16-year-old daughter raped in front of you is worse. And if we can't say that is worse, then whatever method they are using to discriminate, because of course we're all discriminating, you're going to go left or right. That's a discrimination. You're going to drive somewhere, you're going to eat something. Like, we are discriminating all the time between outcomes that we deem better or worse. And so we are driven, and if people want to say it's this completely unseen hand of things that drives us, fine, but it's not an unknowable hand. You can figure out what those things are. So anyway, the simplest thing is to say we move away from pain and we move towards pleasure. Now, you can obviously get more complicated. That fulfillment is a really interesting thing of you probably had to suffer in order to attain it, but it was suffering towards a noble goal, all of this stuff. So anyway, directionally, this all feels ridiculously simplistic to me. And as long as people are moving directionally in that way, we will be far better off than spending a lot of time debating all the fringe cases. So you can break my ethics down as follows. I'm always pursuing an honorable goal, meaning it uplifts me and others. I am pursuing it in the vein of trying to maximize human flourishing for as many people as humanly possible. And that I'm doing it in pursuit of a thing that I intrinsically care about. So there is very much a selfish aspect in it. So for instance, I am trying to uplift the world by giving them a growth mindset through story. Now, through story, not because I think necessarily it's the greatest way, although it actually might be, but that isn't why I'm doing it. It just so happens that the thing that I love is potentially the greatest way of doing it. But I just love the way I feel creating characters and stories and worlds and living inside of all that. I just love it. And so since it is honorable to do what I'm doing and has yielded positive outcomes, I feel great. And maybe there would have been a way to live my life that was even better by just pure maximizing my goal. Sure, but there is a part of my system of belief that says, I've got to love it just for the sake of the everyday grind of doing it. And so that's already going to limit it. But as long as the other things are true, then I'm good.
So aiming at human flourishing, I'm curious how that relates to human freedom for you. Like if those are synonymous or if one is a prerequisite to the other or vice versa, I'm not sure. And I'd also, because for me, like a lot of what you're saying, it resonates with me, but I put it in different language, right? I typically say life, liberty, and property is like the proper ethical frame, right? So everyone respects one another's right to live and be free and own things. And other than that, you just leave each other alone, mind your own business. And that creates simultaneously the most moral order and the most economically prosperous order in the world. And that's another way of saying that is maximizing human freedom. That's why I describe myself often as a freedom maximalist. So I'm curious how you relate human flourishing to human freedom, and then how you relate your ethical frame to life, liberty, and property. Are these things synonymous?
Well, it sounds to me like we have strategy and tactics. So what I laid out was strategy. So it's the 30,000 foot view. And then what I hear you defining are the tactics by which you achieve that. Now, I haven't thought through the three that you laid out well enough to know if they are the right tactics, but they certainly aren't obviously wrong. And given how foundational those ideas are to the success of America, and given how pro-America I am, none of that hits me weird. That all seems amazing. And infringing on any of those three, while we certainly do, in the sense that, and this is the one part I think your system will have a checks and balances for, but if it doesn't, it would certainly need one for me to sign off on it, would be, okay, yes, I'm free to do what I want, but let's say that I really am stronger than others and can do things that are bad for them and get away with it and no one will ever know. That would violate my ethics. So if you
mean coercion?
Maybe coercion. Let's take that out of it though. What if so for instance, the US government steals money from people through money printing, but people don't perceive it as that. They perceive it as a good thing. And so now here's a bad thing that people not only won't complain about, they'll actively vote for. But because the people doing it know it's theft, to me, it's immoral. And so that violates my code of ethics. And that's why I'm saying
it's a violation of private property.
Yeah. So like I said, yours might have all the checks and balances for this. But as long as things like that are taken care of, we're good. If they're not, then I still have a problem.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. The case I commonly cite is bloodletting. David Hume said you can't get an ought from an is. But I think this is the purpose of ethics, actually, is that we try to derive oughts from ises. So bloodletting, right? There was a period of time where we thought, hey, if we drain blood out of people that are sick, it's actually going to help them get better. Therefore, we ought to do it, right? This was a prescribed medical treatment. And then eventually our level of understanding increases to such an extent that we realize, oh, hey, bleeding people that are sick is actually making their conditions worse and decreasing their chances for survival. So we ought not to do it, right? This is basically the domain of medical ethics. So It's like bloodletting something you ought not to do based on our current level of knowledge. But I'll still, if an individual just wants to bleed themselves in the belief that, even the false belief that they think it's going to help them, who am I to interfere or coerce them not to do that? That's where I draw the line. Is like, it is ultimately, you own yourself. You can do whatever you want, right? Your body is your temple. You can take whatever drugs you want. You can do whatever procedures on yourself you want, but you should never be coerced into doing those things. And the same with the money printing, right? If people want to believe that saving in a money that can be printed is the best thing for them, well, then so be it. Who am I to tell them? I can obviously argue to the contrary, but I would not ever justify coercing someone into holding a currency that could be arbitrarily printed. So almost like a monetary ethical position that was analogous with medical ethics. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. So the interesting thing is, when you were talking about an ought from an is, that particular example does not strike me as an ought from an is. I think what's happening is they go, I think that this will help, therefore we ought to do this. The ought is coming from, they have a perhaps unnamed value, which is that preserving human life with every method that we can think of. And I'm sure if pressed, they would say yes within our code of ethics, and then they would have to define that. But they weren't doing that because they could. They were doing it because they wanted something that thing seemed to lead to.
Yeah.
And so, because I agree with, you can't get ought from is, but you most certainly will be at a position where the thing you're trying to achieve creates the ought do something, and that something is going to be what is, right? Because you can't, we ought to magically make the cancer go away. Sure, but you can't, because magic isn't real. And so now you're left with, you're going to have to ground that in what is, which will be imperfect, and blah, blah, blah. It's going to have complications.
Yeah, it's tricky because it's really all, we have to derive the oughts, and all we really have to go on are the ises, so to speak, because there is what there is, and then we have to decide what we ought to do about it. And maybe it's not possible, but we still have to do it somehow. So
You mean that the moment of action will always be based on an is?
Well, the moment of action is always based on an aim, right? So we have to choose what to aim at, but we can only base that choice on what is, right? Or what has been, I guess you could say more generally, right? We could look at history, we could look at our own life experience.
But if you rephrase the bloodletting, it's not about bloodletting. What we ought to do is everything in our power to save this person. That's the ought.
Yeah.
Now that ought is based on a value system that says life is precious and we ought to do the things we can to...
And any value system that is not based on life is precious will destroy humanity, basically, right? If you don't treat human life as...
Interesting, because you and I think, both agree that if somebody wants to commit suicide, they should be able to.
Yeah, of course.
But if human life were precious, in that moment, I'm saying there's this thing that supersedes that, which is you should be able to control your own destiny.
This is why I say, above all, freedom, right? If you just actually give people freedom, life, liberty, and property.
Now, what would you do if the person were mentally ill? They can't make an accurate decision about what tomorrow could be like.
Who's the arbiter of that?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, look, I'm not saying it's the perfectly right answer, but for me, it's just the one I've chosen to adopt, is like honoring individual self-ownership above all things, so that individuals can choose what to do with themselves up to the point of infringing upon anyone else, right? Like, my self-interest stops where yours begins, right? The classic, my right to swing my fist stops where your face begins type of thing. And so, maybe it's overly simplistic. The devil's always in the details, but I can't formulate any higher way for humans to be in the world other than that.
Yeah, this is where I don't know that this is where it breaks down, because I have not looked hard enough at the ought versus is problem, but I have a feeling we step out of what is useful and step into mental masturbation. It's like, bro, I can only interact with the world where things are real and I can do something about it. And so how leeches became the bad guy in the scenario, it's just like that's the tool that I have. And one day we're probably going to look back and say that the way we treat cancer today is just absolutely ludicrous, and you're basically scorch earthing the immune system so that you can kill the more vulnerable cells, but you basically walk this person to death's door and then try to rebuild back from there. But And now we have these things that are way better and we never should have done that. Well, is that true? I mean, it becomes this more seemingly complicated thing of why you did it.
Right.
But the real reason you did it is you believe that you should do everything you can to preserve human life, except perhaps tread on freedom.
Human freedom,
and I think a lot of people would tread on freedom and they would say this person was not of sound mind and body, and I ought to be able to make that decision. And you start to get to those edge cases and where
then
it's
that's a
tricky and
very
stuff.
slippery slope, because then once you've justified one person's control over another person, well, then what's to prevent that person from controlling that person to their grave rather than to their flourishing, right?
Yeah.
So it's very tricky. So
really fast, I want to say something. I'm testing an idea. I want to see how this plays. The comments will let me know if there's any validity to this idea. I think everybody gets really squeamish because every policy ends with either we're going to take care of everybody and we end up in a totalitarian state, or we are knowingly going to let some people die. And because nobody wants to say, we're knowingly going to let some people die, it just sounds so terrible that then you end up deranging to the left always.
When you say let people die, I mean, so far as I know, there's no way for us to stop people from dying. So what do you mean in particular by that?
Oh, there's all kinds of ways. Hey, there's a ton of homeless migrants that have been flown to New York that are wildly ill prepared for the winter. And some of them are going to freeze to death on the streets of New York unless we give them all hotels.
But to give them hotels,
they're
we have
going
to
to
steal
die.
purchasing power from someone else.
Correct? But
So that's
good
where-
luck getting people to say that, we're going to let some people die.
Yeah, I guess for the radical anarcho-capitalist inside of me, it's like, if that's a real problem that real people want solved, they'll just do it consensually. You don't need to actually steal from people to save these people from dying. And actually, those individuals pursuing their self-interest, maybe they'll go south, right? Why did they fly north in the first place? Probably they were shipped there by some government expenditure, which was again stolen purchasing power from someone else. So
we're in the position that we're in. So here's where this really first started making my radar. There's this thing in Washington State called the McKinney-Vento law. I think I'm getting that right, where no child left behind. And so you've got school districts paying to drive a school bus, 2 hours one way to pick up a single kid and bring them all the way back another 2 hours to that school so that they're not disrupted mid-school year if they had to move for whatever reason. That's insane. And my thing is that kid may not get as well educated for the second half of that year because something happened in their family and they had to move away. It's tragic. But that's the most ridiculous policy I've ever heard in my life, that you're going to throw that much capital at that one kid. It's like, at some point you just have to say, we have to protect the majority to make sure that we're giving them an incredible experience as judged by metrics, which we are not currently doing. But I get why you don't want to see that kid left behind. And I get it. Just assume that's like my cousin or my nephew or my best friend's kid. And I'm like, oh man, this is so rad. They'll go all the way out there and pick them up. That's so cool. But on the whole, that is a terrible policy that does not scale.
I agree with that. And there's a lot of areas where family, community, charity, I think could solve some of these problems that the state is always trying to insert itself into. And that's the problem that I have, because you have to always remember, behind every state action is an act of theft. So the fact that you're stealing from someone to fix this problem, it's like easy to hack the compassion circuitry and be like, oh yeah, well, we don't want to leave that kid behind. But this is a classic case of the seen versus the unseen. You see the kid getting left behind. You don't see, as most people don't see, the people that are being robbed to fund the 2-hour bus trip to and fro. Are you sick of being robbed by politicians through inflation and endless money printing? If so, you need to be at Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville, Tennessee on July 25th through 27th. As the largest Bitcoin and Fintech conference in the world, Bitcoin 2024 stands as a beacon of monetary freedom, a glimmer of hope amongst a darkening macroeconomic backdrop. Top speakers, companies, and thought leaders from across the industry will convene in Nashville to look ahead to the next year
and beyond. I will be there, and Bitcoin conferences like this have become my favorite place to socialize since becoming a Bitcoiner. Ticket prices will increase soon. Get your tickets now and secure your spot at this game-changing event. So go to b.tc/conference and use discount code BREEDLOVE to sign up for the Bitcoin 2024 conference. Again, that's b.tc/conference, discount code BREEDLOVE.
Over the past 9 years, I've been going through a pretty serious struggle with my personal health. It started with a sharp pain and stiffness in my hip after a lifting injury, which I later learned was related to some pretty extensive inflammation in my gut. Then I developed an autoimmune issue, and soon I was having joint pain all over, skin irritations, and all kinds of digestive issues. I visited many doctors trying to figure out what was wrong, but none of them were able to help me fix any of my issues. I eventually started to see an energy healer with whom I had some limited success, but it wasn't until I started working with the biohacker Anthony DiClementi last year that I was finally able to start making real progress on my healing journey. Anthony spent a lot of time with me learning about my specific situation and worked with me to adapt a custom health plan to address my needs. Anthony has served as a personal biohacker for celebrities, billionaires, and professional athletes all over the world. Besides helping people like me overcome health issues, Anthony and his world-class medical team also help guys that just want to optimize their cognitive performance, guys that want to pack on some muscle, and guys that just want to get shredded. Anthony keeps a tight book of business and is selective about the clients he brings on. To apply for Anthony's biohacking services, text Breedlove to 847-943-7221. Again, to apply for Anthony's biohacking services, just text Breedlove to 847-943-7221. Okay, so you said something there a minute ago, though, like we run the risk maybe of veering off into intellectual masturbation, which I think was related to your earlier comment on philosophy, that a lot of it can just be this highfalutin, abstract, propositional, mental masturbation, basically, right? It doesn't have any practical implications for real enacted existence. Philosophy originally means the love of wisdom, right? Philia Sophia. I would assume wisdom does matter to you, though. So maybe philosophy and this kind of this version of it, right, where people are just intellectually jerking off is not useful to you. But I assume wisdom is. How do you think about cultivating wisdom and implementing it practically into your life?
Well, so implementation is the right word. So I love philosophy. I think philosophy is critically important. Philosophy has had a huge impact on my life. And I think that people should outline their own life philosophy. What I'm saying is there becomes a point where philosophy stops being about its utility in your life and starts being about really effete intellectuals getting in these big arguments over things that ultimately will never interact with reality. And the more
this is why utility is your cornerstone again.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Do I invite everybody to make utility their cornerstone? Yes, I do. It's one of those where I won't say one ought to make utility a cornerstone, but I don't understand why they don't. So you want a thing in your life. Hopefully that thing is noble and it is achievable, but you have to exist in a loop of, again, what I call the physics of progress. And then you can actually get where you want to go. Yeah. And most people just don't do that because they don't prize utility.
Fantastic. So then is wisdom bound up with utility for you?
Wisdom is utility expressed in meme form over time. Wisdom is the ability to say, when I think like this or I act like this, I get this outcome and it is superior. And when something feels really wise, it's also packaged in a way that's easy to remember, easy to transmit. And now we're like, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Wisdom, because
that was how you defined religion earlier, I think, right? Was like the best meme packaging to propagate it across minds and time. And what you just said there is wisdom is utility packaged in meme form.
Yes.
So are we talking about religion being practical in a way, perhaps?
The only reason that religion exists is because it has allowed cultures that adopt it to survive better than cultures that don't. And so here's the thing, though. Religion has some wild problems. The second and third order consequences, like When you start reading about the Crusades, it's like, oh, that quickly became about money. So it's one of the things that religion is really good at is galvanizing people in a gigantic tribe. So it doesn't matter what your background is. You believe in the same God that I believe in. We are brothers. And we're going to go fight in the name of God. And God wants us to win. God wants us to go do this.
Yeah.
And so again, because that will propagate across all intellectual strata, now you've got like the really smart aristocrat who wants to earn his chivalry in battle, going and conquering Jerusalem. And you've also got the failed bricklayer who is just like, oh my God, this is my chance to make something of my life. And God wants me to do this. And so they go and do their thing. And everybody is one under the banner of Christ or Muhammad or whatever. And so it's excruciatingly good at doing that. But when you get that God wants me to kill the infidel, now it's like, oof, this isn't like Bobby down the street wants me to kill the infidel. It's God himself, eternal paradise. And so now you get people going hard and they just cannot be dissuaded. And so the very thing that allowed them to organize flexibly in these gigantic groups of people they'd never met previously, which is like the great invention of the human civilization, also becomes a thing where it's like, well, now we got a bunch of these things and they're fucking colliding. And so there's the only law of history is the law of unintended consequences. And so building up these religions allowed us to do incredible things, but it also allowed us to kill in the name of God.
And you mentioned it was often over the money or the resources. And the one thing common to all of these disparate religious sects is that they all believed in gold, for instance. Money has been described as a belief system by many people. So what? Yeah. I want to get into your personal stuff, but I have to ask this question now. What is money religious? Is there a religious dimension to money? And if so, is that the religion that supersedes other religions? Because you have multiple religions fighting over often the money or the resources in a belief system that they share.
I think it can take on a religious quality in that it is the thing before which you kneel. And so I get how it can enter into that conversation, but money is the great facilitator. It's a little bit like fame. There is a reason people will forever chase fame because fame actually matters. It opens doors for you that otherwise would not be open. You get treated differently. You have access to things that other people don't have access to. Literally just yesterday, somebody I've never met before in my life paid for my dinner and was like, thank you, for your show. And what's that?
Here in Miami.
Yeah.
So just a random person came up.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the funny thing was he was at a business dinner. I tried to pay for the whole table, but because his boss was there, they wouldn't let me. But it matters, and therefore people will forever pursue it. Money is a great facilitator. It will let you do things that people without money can't do. And so people will always chase it because it is so useful. It will always be pursued. But I don't think that money isn't the thing that allows us to organize together under a banner like brothers. It is a thing that allows us to see in somebody else utility. And so it brings out something very different in that if I see, let me see if I can use sports as a way to really bring the difference across. Okay, if you and I both support the same team and let's say that team is like kind of obscure and we meet each other in Spain, but we're both repping like this farm league basketball team from, Indiana. It's like, oh my God, the rarity of it, the specialty of it. Now I feel like I know something about you. Whoa, like now all of a sudden we feel this common bond. I like you already. I want to get to know you. We probably share a lot in common. Now put us both on that team competing for the same position. Religion is, oh my God, you love the same God I love. That's incredible. We're going to be welcomed into the same heaven. We follow the same precepts. Like we have a shared history and value set. So there it's like the shared commonality. Whoa, like it feels good. Everything about that is expansive. Conversely, money is like, I might be able to get money from you, with you if I'm really thoughtful, but from you. And so now there's a sense of zero-sumness in it. Are you going to get something from me? Am I going to get something from you? Now, that's people with the wrong attitude about money. But so many people have that attitude about money that it doesn't immediately bring out the best in people.
Is that a fiat symptom, do you think? Because when you were describing that just now, what was coming up for me is my experience of Bitcoin conferences. I go to these Bitcoin conferences and I see Bitcoiners, and it's like we're all pulling for the same sports team.
Bitcoin at this phase in its development is very much a religion.
Okay.
So, and here's the interesting thing. Okay, Bitcoin's just an idea. Be interested to see if the Bitcoiners are like, yeah, word, or if they really hackle at that. But here's why I say that. There have been a bunch of other Bitcoin ripoffs. They just haven't gained traction. Not because they're not equally as valid. In fact, I could copy every line of code of Bitcoin and call it Bitcoin 2.0. It will still fail. And the reason it will fail is because the idea hasn't caught on in people's minds. And so a bunch of people like you and me, and I'm on the fringes, you're very much at the center, Sailor, have really done a lot to propagate the idea, because ultimately the idea still has to propagate. You need apostles, right? Jesus could have just been a guy that came and went and that was that, but he had apostles and they did a very good job of getting out there, spreading the word, making other people, feel the spirit of God in the way that Jesus was trying to do. It made their lives better. And so they wanted to tell other people. And because it actually works, it spreads like wildfire. Same thing with Bitcoin, but it's still an idea and people will attack that idea. And if enough people attack that idea and they break its branding, which is a representation of that idea in other people's minds, then you really can kill the idea, even though it has like all these tremendous qualities. You can kill the idea. And so people say you can't kill ideas. That is dumb. I don't know who said that. It's branding, man. And you can break branding. So I think people really do have to fight for it in the same way that they would fight for a religion, be apostles. And so look, in 50 years, if Bitcoin really becomes Bitcoin, there's going to be a Mount Rushmore of the people that put it forward. And I think we'll all agree that Sailor's on Mount Rushmore. And so we will all, if it ends up working and we have this monetary system that sits outside of the government, we'll all owe him a debt of gratitude for what he did. So that is the truth, that it is an idea that humans must breathe life into, push. And for that reason, Bitcoin feels like a religion right now. But it will one day just be a sort of boring, tried and true thing. This is what you want to save in. And I don't think it'll feel like a religion because the idea will be so ingrained that it will become the water. People won't even realize that they're living in a world where Bitcoin had to come into existence. It will just feel like it always has been and always will be.
I assume that you would think that people would have more of a positive sum mentality on a Bitcoin standard rather than how am I going to get money from this person, the zero sum fiat mentality, because, well, that's less possible on a Bitcoin standard, right?
I don't think so. I think that, so here's the way that money works. It's hard to amass and amassing it, like a lot of it, it really is zero sum. And so even if people need to remember that money printing simply lessens everyone's purchasing power. So if you think of it as purchasing power is a zero sum game.
But productivity increases aggregate purchasing power. So that would be positive sum, right?
Yes, but now productivity is a totally different ballgame. So productivity may be the one thing that people aren't weird about, but money is simply the result of productivity. And so now if I'm like, hey, my productivity only yields $50,000 a year. Your productivity somehow yields $50 million a year. I feel some kind of way. And so now this does not feel good. And this is the Gini coefficient all over. People don't care about how much money they make. They care about how much they make in relation to their neighbor. And so that just is true. Give a capuchin monkey a cucumber for clicking the number 3 and he's happy. Give his neighbor a grape for clicking the number 3. And even though he's still getting his cucumber, which 9 seconds ago he was happy about, he's now going to freak the fuck out. And that's the human experience. And so maybe it shouldn't, but it does trigger this sense of like, I want my productivity to yield me the same ability to buy the things that I want that you have, and it doesn't. And I don't know why. And now it just feels unfair. And so I do look at you sideways as you're the filthy capitalist that's stealing all my money, which isn't what's happening.
Right.
It's that but now let's get real dark for a second. I don't know how I'm talking about this because it's real. I don't like that it's real, but it is real that if you are, intelligence isn't enough. So it's intelligence plus X factor. But if you don't have a certain level of intellect, which is probably much lower than people think, but you do have to meet minimum requirements. If you don't meet minimum intellectual requirements, you will fail in life. And so that just really is real. And so you're always going to run up against people for whom they just don't have the intellect to pull it off, but they're perfectly capable of creating a lot of destruction. And so you get into a pretty gnarly space where Bitcoin or otherwise, you're just going to have people that want to see the system burn.
Fascinating. Yeah. So, I mean, one last comment and I'll just let it go. But my view, which is slightly different than yours, I think, is that in a Bitcoin standard, you actually root for other people to succeed, because every time you have a successful business enterprise, the value of my savings goes up. Whereas in fiat world, we sort of have that, but we also sort of don't, because we're all getting kind of, basically the more theft you have occurring, the more we're getting pulled towards the zero sum mentality. The less theft we have occurring, the more we're being pulled towards the positive sum mentality as a general view.
So let's just be real clear. There is a brief moment in time where that's on balance true. But now I want you to imagine where all the Bitcoin that are ever going to be printed are printed, and they're out. And now I'm slapped in the face with no more will ever be printed. And so now I have to find a way to get some from someone that already holds it. And if I'm a wage slave and I have a fixed amount and I can run the math and I know how many I'm going to have by the time I die if I effectively don't spend any of them, and I look at that number and I'm like, that's less than this guy has, for an afternoon's work. I once made, what was the math? I once made, I think it was $5,000 a minute. Now, you can imagine that some people are going to feel some kind of way about that. And in a world where it's like, I don't even have the illusion of printed money to trick me into not realizing that this actually is a zero sum. Like, it's actually possible that one person ends up with all the Bitcoin. Be real hard, but it is possible. And so you really start getting the weirdness of the human mind. But I will agree with you right now that really is a thing, and we should all enjoy it and embrace it and try to bake that into the culture as much as possible. But also, as somebody who went through the full pre-realization that Web3 is a technology, because people still have not woken up to that, I watched it go from Web3 is embracing of everybody and we love you all, and now it is like a fuck you fest. So it's just, that's the human mind. Like, once it doesn't feel like sort of easy money, then people start getting real bitter real fast. Yeah,
I agree with the relativity thing, right? People are always going to care about how much they're making relative to other people. It's always it's the pecking order, right? Like, where do you sit in the hierarchy, basically? But my hope is, and I guess this is just a hope because it's unproven, is that hierarchy will just be based more on cooperation and productivity rather than let me undermine, deceive, steal, all these weird fiat things we have today, because those things will just be less possible on a big
Fiat makes everything worse.
Yeah.
However, you still have the human animal.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin isn't going to change the human animal. So all the things that are true about the human animal will keep being true.
That's the big question there, actually. Yeah, I agree with you. It doesn't change the human animal, but how much do incentives shape how we act? Maybe it doesn't change our human nature, but maybe we're pouring human nature into a new container.
So what do you see on the other side of this? Is it holding hands and singing Kumbaya?
I'm going to have to answer that question next time you interview me, because that's a long question.
Dude,
but I don't see that at all. But I see a step up in human civilization. right? We've come a long way from Pharaoh God Kings to where we are today. I see another step up in that direction. I don't know exactly what it looks like.
I will give you that. It's just a question of how big is that step.
Yeah.
But Bitcoin is a miracle.
Okay, you said ideas can be killed, can be stopped. And I swear this is the last question that I want to ask you about your personal stuff. What about an idea like...
By the way, this is far more interesting than any of my personal stuff, so you can just keep going.
What about an idea like Christ?
Yeah.
Like, do you think an idea, and maybe that's not the one, choose a different one, right? Buddha, whatever long-standing idea. The number 0, I think, is a very interesting one. Like, there's certain ideas that I think aren't going anywhere. Do you share that view that at some point an idea can become so permanently entrenched in the collective psyche that it's just there?
No, I do not. So I think people fail to understand that I think it was either Lenin or Stalin was like, give me one generation with your kids and I will change the entire world. And truer words never spoken. The next generation only knows what they're taught. So none of us are born knowing anything. Now it's shocking to think that we don't know 0. That is crazy. But also, if Graham Hancock is right, there was a civilization. That shit got nuked by an asteroid or something, and this just all went away.
Okay.
And so one, that's like sort of the big trauma. But can you kill an idea where you didn't have to kill everybody to do it? That's an easier way to ask it.
Yeah.
I would say if you can, here's what you can do. You can shift the lightning rod for that idea from one thing to another. And so like Bitcoin today, something else tomorrow. That for sure could happen. If you end up damaging the brand of Bitcoin badly enough. Like if Satoshi comes back and is like, haha, suckers, I'm the person that actually has all the kids in the basement of the pizzeria and I'm killing them all. And I'm now going to go spend my Bitcoin. You guys are fucking idiots. Bitcoin would be fucked. And all of a sudden, now somebody else would just be like, look, we are Bitcoin without the child killing in the pizzeria basement. And people would be like, okay, not Bitcoin anymore, but this same thing. Now, if somebody said, see, Tom, that's proof that you can't kill the idea, it moved over here. I would say to that, no, you can't kill the utility. And as long as there's utility, yes, people are going to follow the utility. But where you guys are at right now, where we're at, if I'm going to be so inclusive as to throw myself in, is we're still trying to make sure that the idea of Bitcoin sticks. And don't think I don't see you Bitcoiners going real hardcore now. It's not crypto, it's Bitcoin. And you're trying to differentiate the brand. You're trying to like really draw some new boundaries, some new borders. Because for a while, it was good. Let people talk about crypto, just be the flagship in crypto. But now it's like, hey, we need everybody to know we're not these fuckhead scammy things. Like this is a totally different ball game.
Yeah.
So this is all a branding exercise. And if you guys truly believed you couldn't kill an idea, none of you would waste time like campaigning for it and talking about it over and over and over and over and over. It would be inevitable, but it isn't inevitable.
Yeah, it's the Carl Jung thing where people don't have ideas, but ideas have people. There's some point in the Bitcoin journey that it just gets a hold of you and you're like, this is just the most important thing in the world. Like
because it has perceived utility. It's the only amendment that I'll make to
it's
that.
the extreme utility to the individual, right? Like you can preserve purchasing power in a perfect money, but then there's also this whole ethical imperative. You're like, oh shit, the entire world is burning because it's under the scam of central banking. I can now beat this drum and help wake people up and help save people. So I'm adding to the collective, but also improving my own self-interest in the process. So it's like this virtuous loop of selflessness and selfishness. And that seems to be the idea that really grabs people, like, and yeah, can come to define your life to a large extent for some of us. So,
yeah.
Okay. Your journey, there was a time, and I'm sharing this secondhand. Laren, my girlfriend's a big listener to your podcast. I told you I don't listen to that many podcasts, but I have listened to a few of your things. But she was sharing, and I think this is maybe when you were on the Diary of a CEO, that there was a time where you were so desperate for money that you were digging into your sofa for change to pay for gas. And I'm wondering how your conception, I assume that was a time when you were much less alpha male than you are today.
That's fair.
How has your conception of what it means to be an alpha male changed since then? And then how has your relationship with money changed since then?
Well, my relationship with money has changed dramatically in that I now understand what it is at its essence. I now know how to make it, and I have a lot of it. So it's really, really a dramatic shift. But also in some ways, that period of my life was thrilling because I believed I would figure it out. I believed I was going to be rich. And so digging in my couch cushions, there was no sense of like deep trauma or shame. It was like, look at me doing whatever it takes to be successful, you know, because if I remember right at the time, I was digging in my couch cushions to get gas to go to a job interview. So I was like really taking my life seriously. And now look, that there's periods in there that are very, very dark, and people have heard me talk about those because I didn't know how to control my life yet. But at the same time, I really did have an almost unbridled optimism of my future. I just didn't know how to get there yet. So as with anything, if you put time and energy into getting better at it, you will. And so I put time and energy into getting better at making money, into building businesses, into controlling my life, into controlling my mind and my emotions, into being able to architect a plan and then execute a plan, and being able to overcome entropy, which ultimately is one of the most important things anybody will do. Certainly if you're trying to be an entrepreneur, you're just up against entropy all day, every day.
Yeah.
And if you can actually figure out how to get out of the gravity well of the world is trying to stop you, you will feel like a superhero to yourself. In fact, that may be like when I really boil down what makes me respect myself. It is that I am able to get escape velocity, meaning if you're trying to get to the moon, the Earth is exerting such a massive gravitational force that you need all of this combustible fuel to launch you into outer space. It takes a tremendous amount of energy. That same level of just ridiculous amounts of energy are required to build anything of significance. And so if you're able to train yourself to be able to withstand how hard that is, if you're able to train yourself to know the trajectory you have to put yourself on, and then prove to yourself that you can do it over and over and over again, even when you get knocked back, it's really pretty extraordinary. And that is the closest thing that I have to feeling like I understand the secret of the universe, where I don't quite know how to articulate it, but like the reason you feel like the world is trying to stop you is because the world is trying to stop you. The second law of thermodynamics is that everything moves towards chaos. When you understand that, and that you understand what I'm trying to do if you're trying to make money, is you're trying to bring order to a chaotic system. Right. Now, the second part of the second law of thermodynamics, which nobody ever talks about, is if you want to bring order to a chaotic system, you must pour energy in from the outside. And so you are the pourer of that energy. And so once people understand, oh, I can pour energy into my life in such a disciplined, explicit, goal-oriented way that I can actually get wherever I want to go, like then that becomes this spiritual pursuit of like, what do I spend my time getting good at? Where do I apply my energies? Where am I trying to go? Am I actually getting there? What do I need to change? What do I need to improve? And then go there. It is one of the greatest joys of your life to be able to solve for that problem. Wow. And any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. That's the same way that when you're an effective CEO, you look like to your team. It looks like you have some magic insight that they don't have. And how are you able to solve these problems and do these things? And the great gift I can give everybody is it has absolutely nothing to do with that person. It is simply a set of ideas. And if you adopt those same set of ideas and build the discipline, but if you adopt the same set of ideas and thusly imbue the same behaviors, you will get the same results. It's not that those people are special or different. It's just that they actually understand how to overcome the gravity well of chaos.
Wow. Fascinating framing. Yeah, we are anti-entropic agents, right? That's kind of what life is doing, literally just trying to fight the tide of entropy. Ultimately, individually we fail, right? We all die eventually, but collectively we seem to succeed, right? We build a civilization in the process. So
that's crazy.
Very fascinating to look at it that way. My girlfriend also shared that one thing that really stuck out to her about listening to your podcast was at one time you were asked the question, who would you credit for being where you are today, or who would you credit for being the most impactful person in your life? And you said your wife. And this was contrary to a lot of answers that other people had given. You know, typically there's a mentor or something like that. Obviously, you've mentioned your wife several times today, but what is it? How has your wife been so impactful in your life? Like, what is it that makes her the most? Assuming that question is correct and I haven't misstated it.
Very much so.
Is what makes your wife the most impactful person in your life?
Okay, so I had the very good fortune of meeting my wife when I was young. So I met her when I was 24. We got married when I was 26, and I was primed to be shaped. And we can all shape ourselves, but may you all find people in your lives that will help shape you, which is why you hear stories of a mentor or something like that. It just so happened that Lisa didn't just intrigue me physically, she intrigued me mentally. And I was like, whoa, like she is smart, but in ways that I'm not. She is insightful in areas that I'm blind. And I am smart in ways that she's not and insightful in ways that she's not. So there was like this sense of balance of like, whoa, we really bring something to each other. And so both of us recognized very early on, like, wait a second, there's something here where we push each other and test each other in ways that we've never been pushed or tested by somebody else ever. And here's something that people are just uncomfortable. And I'm gonna say it really bluntly, and this will be a fun experiment. Because my wife could reward me sexually when there were behaviors of masculinity. I mean, she's the biggest reason I became as masculine as I did, was she saw masculine traits in me in the beginning and then just rewarded the shit out of that. So those all became exaggerated, like 1,000-fold. And because every time I turned around and was more masculine, took more of a lead, was more in charge, more aggressive, but could do it in an integrated way where I didn't lose touch with being loving and caring, which we can get into this, has become the hard thing for her as I've become hyper masculine. She now longs for some of the traits that I leaned way more on in the beginning of our relationship. And so that's been another interesting balance for it, where she's acted as these bumpers, right? Like in the beginning I was too feminine and now I'm too masculine. And so she helps me really remain this integrated person. But because she had sex in her arsenal in a way that nobody else in my life could use that to draw traits out of me, but could also be like, in this negotiation, say this, you're likely being taken advantage of by that person in this way. And that's not a good look. And so it was like, oh shit, like, whoa, like, you know, she's thinking like, you're being a pussy on this. Like, don't, like, you need to fucking step up. And so it was like, I used to call her Lady Macbeth. And I was like, man, you're more hardcore than me. And so she's like in the background, legitimately scheming, like, okay, this is the play, try this, try that. And not puppeteering me because I was hyper ambitious. I was already playing my own game. But I would come home and be like, okay, well, I'm in this situation or whatever. And sometimes she was like, brilliant. Oh my God, you're so amazing, right? Like giving me all that, like turning on the charm, seducing me, like wanting to reward me for this, you know, behavior that she's not thinking it's masculine. She's just thinking, shit, that turns me on. Like, you're so powerful. I love that. And she would always say that, oh, it turns me on, like how powerful you are and you're getting promotions and I fucking love it. And then if I would come home and be like, oh, I'm in this situation and this is how I'm going to handle it. She's like, I don't know, like that doesn't feel right. What if you tried this? And then if it was like, you know, I'm just not pushing on a button I should be pushing on, or I'm letting somebody push me around, she would let me try to find my way to it. But when it stopped being sexy, she'd be like, the way you're handling that, it's not sexy. Like, that's not cool.
Wow.
And so then I'm like, oh, damn, like, you know, you want to look tough in front of your wife. Like, oh shit, I got to go handle this. And so it just, all of those ways, she is truly wise. And I mean, look, we were both dumb in our 20s. Don't get me wrong. But her at 24 was wiser than most people at 24. And so she's just always had keen insights, good business instincts. And so I could come home, because at first she was the housewife and I was the entrepreneur, and that was the division. But I would come home and be like, whoa, that's like a really keen insight.
Yeah.
And so when we started Quest, I was like, you should come help. Like, you're really smart at this stuff. She's like, I don't know. Like, I feel like I'm way over my head. And so I'm like, yeah, but you're smart. Like, I have a feeling you'll figure this out. And she ends up realizing, holy shit, like I'm a legitimate entrepreneur unto my own self. And that was incredible, incredibly difficult. And that's a whole nother podcast. But watching her realize, oh shit, my brain can process entrepreneurial things from the side of the operator, whereas I come from the side of the CEO, the visionary. And so you put us together, and now all of a sudden we understood the dynamic we had been playing up until that point. I had a vision for our lives. I knew how I was going to move through the company. I knew to pursue equity and not salary and like all this stuff. And she understood where the strategy was going to become a tactic. And yeah, so you put all that together, and she's my best friend. Legitimately, I almost don't have friends because she's the only person I want to be around. Like, she's just the shit. She is so fun to be around. And I get to sleep with her. And as somebody who's incredibly sex motivated, like that for me is like this just intoxicating cocktail of a woman who looks at me like I'm a superhero, who has so much of my respect. The fact that she looks at me like I'm a superhero feels awesome. And when I do things that don't fall into superhero territory in the most loving, encouraging way possible, she's going to point it out, which then gets me, because I want her to look at me like I'm a superhero. And so I get back on that track, and then her ideas are actually good, and she is very emotionally stable. That's one thing to understand about my wife. She has a slightly masculine temperament. I have a slightly feminine temperament. And so you put those together and we meet in the middle where I can understand her emotions sometimes faster than she can, so I can help her understand where she's going, what's happening. And at the same time, she's incredibly bright and shrewd and understands a lot of life, and also has the thing probably that I need, and for a lot of years didn't realize how badly I needed, which was somebody that could let things just roll off her back like water off a duck's back. Because when I'm being aggressive, I can have what my wife and I lovingly refer to as dead shark eyes. And so I can be like, this is what we have to do. Like, it's just pure utility. And she'll be like, yeah, but that doesn't feel good. And so she can just let that go, let it go. And then when she's at a point, she's like, I need my husband now, not my business partner. And then I know when she says that to just step into a way more feminine frame, find out where she's at emotionally, connect emotionally, let go of efficiency, and be like, if she needs to tell a story for 45 minutes that could be told in 9 seconds, I'm going to be here for the 45 minutes. Because she doesn't, as the Brits would say, she doesn't take the piss. Like, normally she'll let me be like, I need this in 9 seconds. And she just lets it go, brushes it off, whatever. And then when she's like, I need a husband right now, then because she's so good, I snap out of it and I'm there.
That is so cool. It's almost like she was incentivizing you to cultivate these masculine traits. Also maybe liberating you to do so, I guess. Like, so she's handling one side of life, I presume, right? What she's at home, you said she's homemaker, whatever. So that's sort of freeing you up to just focus on work and your masculine stuff. Are you then doing that for her reciprocally? Are you so she's freeing you up to really expand your masculinity, right? This is the enabling thing she's giving you. Are you then doing that for her too? So
of course,
in stepping more into your masculinity, you then let her step more into her femininity. And is that the magic of long-term partnership or marriage, is that you get two people that are complementary and that they can grow more? Because, well, one side of they don't need to be the best at both sides of the equation. They can just focus on one side of the equation, divide the labor with the other person.
For a long time, that wasn't what we were doing. What we were doing for a long time was I was facilitating her expressing herself in very masculine ways. And it ended up creating a huge moment of turmoil for us as she realized, I don't want to be a mother. I want to be an entrepreneur. And I was like, okay, I'm not super worried about the kids part. It's never been a big driver for me. But I do miss having a housewife who facilitates that side of my life and nurtures me and all of that I love. And so long story short, I end up realizing that part of my value system is that I want to help her flourish in whatever way she wants to flourish. I don't believe I should dictate the life that she lives. And I do want to be married to her. And so if she wants to be an entrepreneur, then I'm going to create the space for her to step into that. Now, ironically, as she's getting older and her hormones change, all of a sudden it's a way more feminine existence. And so now I am helping to create space for her to step into something more feminine. And I sent her a string of text messages over the last few weeks because she's really struggling with her health right now. And a big part of it is being an entrepreneur is excruciatingly stressful. And it's just taken a toll on her body. And it's taking a toll on her body that it doesn't take on mine, certainly not in any noticeable way. And so we both wear an Aura ring. And she looked at her ring in a period where she was just objectively dealing with less than I was dealing with. And it was like, her Aura ring was like, you were stressed for 7 hours. I mean, it's just absolutely absurd. I'm dealing with more, and mine said you were dealing with stress for like 27 minutes. And so I just have an insane ability to not be impacted by stress. So when I start getting impacted by stress, like some shit is going on. So anyway, what I told her was, I will work twice as hard to ensure that you can indulge in, keep them private, but in like the feminine things that are becoming more important to you.
Right.
And I will create that space for you. I want to make sure at the end of your life, you're like, I love my life. And I will, even if the stress really affected me and all that, it makes me feel like a warrior for you to be able to go out and work harder and slay dragons and make sure that you have the space to do the things that make you feel the way you want to feel and that you're living the life that you want to live. And especially because she's a woman that's chosen not to have children, I'm like, you have to understand that's excruciatingly dangerous. As a PSA, dear boys and girls, even though Tom and his wife have chosen not to have children, I'm telling you, the most likely path to fulfillment is children. It's not the only path, but it's the one that nature was like, hey, I'm going to make sure this is fulfilling.
Right.
So you deviate that at your own risk. So just be thoughtful. You're going to have plans. So anyway, Lisa has plans for things that she's going to do to make sure that she has nurturing in her life, that there are things that she gives herself over to help them grow and all that. And I think that's incredibly important. And so I was like, every time that neuron fires or your uterus pulses or, however you want to think of that, I was like, I will create the space for you to be able to pursue that. Because the last thing you want is to end up on your deathbed going, I never got to express that side of myself. And so make sure that you hear me when I say, I don't value you for being my business partner. I value you for being my partner. And so we'll figure out like the different ways that will express over time. And so that lets me, though, have this extra motivation to lean into imagery that I already love that make me respect myself, which is that of the warrior. And as a warrior, I need to be fighting for somebody else. Otherwise, it doesn't feel, I just feel like an assassin. So.
Yeah, you have no purpose unless you have the mission, all right? So you mentioned that there's other pathways to fulfillment, and you guys chose not to have children, but you seem to be living fulfilled lives. You don't have to speak to this on her behalf, I suppose, but for you, what has that pathway to fulfillment become?
Okay, so there is only one path to fulfillment, but as I lay it out, I think people will quickly grasp why kids is the most obvious. All right, so this is just a game of evolution. So evolution had to keep us alive long enough to pass our genes on to the next generation. And so nature is going to make sure that you live long enough to have kids that have kids. So every impulse that you have to eat ice cream, every impulse that you have to fall in love, to be kind, all of it, everything, to be aggressive, it's all to ensure that you live long enough to have kids that have kids. Your fear of public speaking is to ensure that you live long enough to have kids that have kids. So knowing that, you just need to ask yourself, okay, what is What are those evolutionary algorithms incentivizing? What will make me feel good? Fulfillment is the ultimate neurochemical state for somebody that needs to stay alive long enough to have kids that have kids. And it goes like this. It's a very simple recipe. You must work very hard to gain a set of skills that you care about for your own intrinsic reasons that allow you to serve not only yourself, but other people. Okay, why would that be the formula? That's the formula because you need to work hard. Why? Because life for all of our evolutionary past was bloody in tooth and claw. Everything was brutally difficult. Getting enough calories to stay alive was brutally difficult. Not getting eaten by something was brutally difficult. And so you had to have a neurochemical reward that said, I went and did a hard thing and I feel good about it, right? You post about proof of work all the time. That's because we all get a benefit from going and learning boxing, lifting weights, being strong. And so as a culture, we celebrate it. As individuals, we feel good when we do it. That's evolution saying, hey, good, you went up and faced the saber-toothed tiger. That intrinsically needs to feel good. And oh, by the way, you didn't go face the saber-toothed tiger. You didn't do anything hard and you feel a sense of dis-ease. This is why rich kids are broken because everything's easy. They never have to work hard. And there's an algorithm in their mind going, hey, why aren't you doing hard things? You have to do hard things. It's just the algorithm's way of making sure, because the algorithm doesn't know that you now live in an era where you can already be rich and not have to do hard things. And that's why people overeat ice cream. Anyway, you're going to have to do hard things for that reason. Now, you're going to have to do hard things to gain a set of skills. Why? Because skills have utility. Ultimately, having all the right ideas in the world don't matter. If you can't actually kill the mastodon, you starve to death. So you need a set of skills. Now, we are all intrigued by something. Some people are going to be the best hunter in their village, and they are just obsessed with getting better at that hunt. Other people, because the tribe needs it to be unified, are going to be things like storytellers. And that storyteller is obsessed with stories and knowledge. And so because the tribe needs both of those for the tribe to survive, because the storyteller is going to give all the values, right? The memes that they need for the culture to stack so that generation after generation, we're getting smarter and not dumber. We're not having to reinvent everything every time somebody's born. You just re-educate them. So you're going to be intrigued by something. So you want to pursue a set of skills that matter to you. By doing that, the group is going to have everything that it needs. It's going to be well-rounded. The next thing is you're going to garner a set of skills that uplift you. They make your life better. So they make you better at the thing. And so that the village has somebody who's good at hunting. The village has somebody that's good at planting. The village has somebody that's good at telling stories or being the witch doctor or whatever. It's uplifting you for sure, but it also needs to uplift the group. Why? Because isolated in a hyper dangerous environment, we're going to get eaten because we are not stronger, faster, sharper, teeth, thicker fur, anything like that. So we're super vulnerable. Our big brains are what we have and our ability to work flexibly in large groups. So you need to contribute to yourself and to the group. And if you do those things, that state, what we call that is fulfillment. So I'm working really hard to gain a set of skills and making progress towards these goals that matter to me and matter to the tribe. When I do all of that, even in a period of grief, I will still feel good about myself. And that's why I say the thing you're optimizing for is self-respect. How do you feel about yourself when you're by yourself? If you feel good about yourself when you're by yourself, you're on the right track. If you don't, then you're on the wrong track. And so ultimately, I'm just looking for things that give me that. Now, the base unit of the group is the family. And that's why I say having kids is like, oh, I'm garnering this set of skills. I'm going off and earning money. And that's the way that I contribute to the group. Cool. It really matters. So you have deep meaning and purpose by going out and making money that I can take care of my wife and my children. Your wife is deriving meaning and purpose by becoming a better mom. So I can raise these kids that are going to be our legacy, that are going to live into the future. And I want them to be as good as they can and to thrive. And so there's deep meaning in getting very good at that. And then obviously you want to do things that aren't just good for you as the mom or the dad, but that are also good for the dad or the mom, whichever one you aren't, and for the kids, so that as a unit, you guys are functioning well, so that that's the basic unit of the whole tribe. So if you're doing good things for the family's doing good things for the tribe. Now you have these multiple layers of protection. Now, if you're not going to have kids, you still have to have those layers of contribution. So now what? So first of all, if you're not at least in a dyad, so you're not married to somebody, so you can at least contribute to that other person, again, just high risk. It doesn't mean you can't be fulfilled, but it does mean that it's going to be harder because you have to have somebody that steps in for that sort of immediate unit that you would normally get that fulfillment from for serving. And then what's the larger group that you're going to contribute to? And so as long as you're doing things that contribute to a group and you get that feedback that you want, then you'll be fine. But you need to understand that your life will be broken into phases. And right now, I'm super protected because I get people that come up and buy me meals and that will say, hi, you've changed my life. And so I have a sense of what I do matters to the group. And because I'm in the hyper like creative phase of my life, I'm putting things out into the world that I created that wouldn't have existed if I hadn't done it. I'm showing up to work every day. There's, 50 families that rely on me. So there's just a ton of that immediate, I'm serving the tribe. So I feel good about that. But when I'm 85, the odds that I'll be in the mix like that every day are pretty low. So I need to be thoughtful about what will that phase of my life be like, where now this is normally where people go, and now I'm just a grandparent and I get to like bask in that. And I've never been happier. And grandparents like the greatest thing you could ever be. Well, I'm not going to have that. So how do I plan ahead to make sure that I have things in my life that fill me up in that same way? Is it that people that I get close to, hey, I want to be the godfather of your kids? Is it that I do some sort of big brothering or big grandpaing, whatever it's going to be? But you need to find those outlets.
So this is a great question, follow-up question. So Tom Bilyeu, the self-identified warrior, self-identified writer, I think you said earlier, self-identified creator, entrepreneur. How do you see stepping into your twilight years in a way that will offer you maximal fulfillment? How do you see that today?
Okay, so right now there are two things that I will almost certainly do, and then this also gets into my AI thesis, but we'll set that aside for now. I will almost certainly write, as that is the thing that I can do that I don't need anybody else for, and has maximum emotional impact on me in the act of doing it. So even if nobody ever read it, the act of writing it would still be extremely fun. And then the second thing is mentor. So I will almost certainly continue mentoring even as I get older. I will probably, though, at some point let go of my obsession with scale. So right now I only do things that can impact millions. You're never going to hear me say, at least not in this phase of my life, you'll never hear me say as long as I impact one person. But I may get to the point where I'm like, and now it's all the scale hassle and all the stress that comes with that. I'm not here for that anymore. I'm just going to help a really small group of people right here in my local area. I'll go donate time at whatever schools look like at that point, or maybe I'm in the metaverse, whatever. But just really intimate, small things to make sure that I still have a sense of I matter and I'm passing on all the things that I've learned to somebody else. And knowing myself well enough, if I have Lisa, this is very easy. If Lisa dies, then it's like that kind of stuff will matter more. And I will almost certainly have a pet. But by then, that pet will almost certainly be AI.
Unexpected ending there. But adding value to people's lives beyond your own seems to be key to this fulfillment.
For sure.
Whether that's your kids, whether that's other people, just that's what we're wired to do, basically.
No doubt.
Tom, man, really grateful to have you come out here.
It's a lot of fun.
This has been a heck of a conversation. We've covered a ton of ground. I think we should go have some lunch.
Let's do it.
Do you want to let people know where they can find you on the internet?
At Tom Bilyeu, YouTube and X.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.